All right. All right, everybody. It's that time again. Now, there is a time change on the show. Today, we're bringing you a special edition of The Hidden Path with Carbon Mike. Um, so, just some quick notes. I had a medical emergency, Carl, your host here. I had a medical emergency on Monday, so we couldn't do the show. Well, on Sunday, so we couldn't do the show Monday. But today we're bringing you a special edition on this Friday. This is not going to be the normal time, but we wanted to at least bring you um, a special edition of the show, not leave you hanging. We have a good show in store for you tonight. We're going to be talking about House Minority Leader on the Democrat side, Hakeem Jeffries. Diet store or Diet Store, yeah, or Dollar Store, rather, not Diet Store. Dollar Store Obama, who has been making waves since he's assumed the number one Democrat in the House. Me and Dexter is going to break down his history and just talk in a conservative point of view about who Hakeem Jeffrey is. That's next on The Hidden Path. All right, everybody. So again, we are talking about Hakeem Jeffries, but before we get into that, we got a few, hot topics to get into. So Dexter,
yes, we do.
How you doing today, man?
All is lovely. All is lovely, or at least as lovely as it can be, given the circumstances. But yeah, all is good. It's been a very interesting week. Well, really 2 weeks, because our last show was at the beginning of last week. So it's been a very interesting couple of weeks. I've been taking my news notes as I usually do, so we can touch on some current events before jumping in on our main topic. Of course, I know you and I have both been watching what's going on in the Middle East. We seem to still be in the middle of an Iran war ceasefire, but it's an on-off ceasefire. We can't tell whether it's really on or really off. People still seem to be trading fire, right? Iranian gunboats versus the U.S. Navy. And of course, there's still a bunch of questions. I, in particular, am still trying to figure out, what was the original mission, and what can we gather about the original mission from what's happening now. And then, of course, who are we negotiating with now? Is it clear? Who are we going to end up negotiating with? And when is this thing going to be over? So that's what's going on. What's interesting, you probably noticed this too in the news, is that some of the European nations seem to be inching toward doing something. I understand France has dispatched a naval task force. It hasn't gotten involved in any of the kinetic activity in the Strait, but I believe France did dispatch a naval task force some time ago. And I read recently that Saudi Arabia is really playing it hands off. They don't want to give the U.S. any basing rights to participate in anything having to do with the U.S. attack on Iran and Iranian assets in the Straits. So, still up in the air, and I'm still waiting for this thing to be over so we can get back to what passes for normal. What have you been? What's been getting your attention, I should say, in the news?
You know me. I'm always two-way focused and looking at 2A News. And, Virginia, this loosely has something to do with 2A News. We all know that Virginia has rigged their districts in a Democratic favor. And we covered this on a previous show about gerrymandering. So the Supreme Court of Virginia, state Supreme Court, shot down the redrawing of their map in alignment with their state constitution. Basically, the state constitution said that they can't do it, and they. Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you. Did this have to do with? We touched on this. And I think at the time I was saying that there was a judge in Tazewell County, Virginia, who said basically that what the legislators in Virginia did was kind of bypass things. Like there's a way that you can do redistricting in Virginia, but they cut corners and they skipped a bunch of steps, and therefore the new map is illegal. Is that what we're seeing now? Is that the Supreme Court has really agreed with that district judge and said, yeah, you didn't do it right, so the new map is off the table? Is that what happened?
Yep, that is exactly what happened. And, a bunch of Democrats are in Virginia and countrywide are upset about this whole outcome. Even suggesting that, they should ignore the court and go along with their redistricting anyways. It's funny, like now the Democrats are hell bent on ignoring the court ruling when it favors them, But when it comes to a Supreme Court ruling, when it comes to the 2A, all of a sudden, well, they kind of follow the same, I guess, beat to their drum, whereas they just defy the Supreme Court. So the Democrats has a habit of not following the law when it suits them.
Right. In other words, if there's a court order that has come down, we don't have to say if there has been. If there's a court order that comes down against, for example, the Trump administration, against, let's say, Homeland Security on some issue that Homeland Security is concerned about, right? Then yes, the Democrats are very keen for everyone to follow the law and to obey the courts. But when it comes to something they want, the music changes. So yeah, we shouldn't be surprised at that.
Another thing in the news that I've been paying close attention to is that Harvey Dillon, the Assistant Attorney General and Director of the Civil Rights Division of the DOJ, has come out with a lawsuit against the city of Denver over their magazine capacity bans. So shout out to Harvey Dillon for doing what we elected President Trump to do, which is stand up for the Second Amendment. I think she should be Attorney General, not just assistant, but the Attorney General. But go ahead, Destin.
I was going to say, one, I don't think so, because I like her where she is. I think if she had to be Attorney General, she'd have to be focusing on a whole lot of other stuff, not just the 2A. And I so much like what she's doing in the Civil Rights Division that I don't want anyone else to run that. I just, God bless her. Go get him, Harvey Dillon. Really. I think also I was reading about that lawsuit. Apparently, it's not just magazine bans. It's also an AR-15 ban that Denver, Colorado is trying to put in place, right? And of course, correctly, the DOJ is saying that, listen, you can't ban the most popular rifle in America. Yes, you can ban people from carrying, from towing around howitzers behind their cars. You can ban people from having nuclear weapons. You can't ban people from having the most popular rifle in America. That's crazy. So, yeah, I definitely predict they're going to succeed in this lawsuit. And I hope they keep the pressure on, obviously not just in Colorado, but in all 50 states. Well, in all of the states where Democrats are going after our rights.
Right. So, I mean, I agree with you on that. I like Harmy Dillon, where she's at. A lot of people have said that they want her as Attorney General, but civil rights is very important, and we need someone who is part of the government that is going to actually protect civil liberties and protect the rights of gun owners everywhere, because when it comes to all of the rights in the Bill of Rights, it seems like the Second Amendment is the least protected right when it comes to government or rights organizations. You don't see organizations like the NAACP coming out trying to protect gun rights. They don't. You don't see that. But if a First Amendment right is violated, or something dealing with your Fourth or Fifth Amendment rights, they're right out in front. But when it comes to the Second Amendment rights, they're lagging far behind. So
that's right. Same thing goes with the ACLU. I mean, when is the last time we ever saw the ACLU stand up for gun rights?
Exactly.
So that's right. So yeah. So God bless Harmy Dillon, and everyone in her office. And like I said, I hope they really keep the pressure on.
I think they will.
Yeah, I think so too. She's a real fighter, that one, and that's what we need. As I look at my notes, shifting topics a bit, but still on current events, apparently, at least according to AP, the U.S. economy grew by 115,000 new jobs in April, which the headline was that was sort of a surprising thing, and the economic pressure on the U.S. economy from the war in Iran, or the war in the Middle East, first and foremost. The averages can be deceiving, but the article in the AP cited that on the average in 2025, the U.S. job gains were about 10,000 a month. So far in 2026, we're seeing an average of 76,000 a month. So that's, at least on the face of it, that seems good. I did notice that the article said that many of the jobs seem to be in healthcare. And they pointed out that given the Trump administration's attempts to onshore a lot more manufacturing, we haven't seen the growth in manufacturing jobs that we might expect. I'm not so surprised with that, because reshoring all these industries that we kind of sent out of the U.S. is going to take time. It would take time under the best of circumstances, and with this war in Iran, with Iran, means we're not in the best of circumstances. So I'm hopeful that our manufacturing numbers continue to increase. I wouldn't want to see, most of our jobs coming from just one industry. The U.S., I think the U.S. economy is as robust as it is, partly because it's as diverse as it is, right? There's lots of different stuff going on. So, I hope we maintain that, and I do hope that manufacturing jobs start to really pick up in the coming months and years.
Yeah, I'm hoping so as well, man. The American economy is built on American manufacturing, so hopefully we can get back to being the proper country that we was.
Yeah, exactly. 100%. 100%. Let's see, what else have we got in current events? Back to the redistricting issue. Have you seen the same thing that there may have been some wins in Indiana in terms of Republicans who were hostile to Trump's agenda getting primaried out by Republicans who are on board. Did you see that?
No, I didn't actually.
Yeah, there was I think there was a big question as to who would prevail in Indiana among Republicans in Indiana, right? It's like that because would prevail. Yeah, because there was a question as to would Indiana Republicans kind of reject Trump's agenda or go for it, and I think the last thing I read said that at least in these primaries, the pro-Trump faction seemed to have won out. And then, of course, Alabama, among others. Alabama is also now redrawing some maps, given the recent U.S. Supreme Court ruling about how you're allowed to draw districts. This is going to be a very interesting. Well, the rest of the year is going to be very interesting as far as that's concerned. So yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, I think this primary season is shaping up to be an interesting one. And the midterms, it's definitely going to be one of the most intriguing midterms we've had in recent memory. So I'm definitely looking forward and watching these races closely to make sure that, no funny business happened this time. We all know what happened in 2020.
Yeah. Well, I think another thing is that we there's a lot of ways in which this administration could still get in its own way, is getting in its own way, right? I've tried to keep a kind of a detached skepticism about the war, the Iran war. But I think, regardless of what you or I or anyone else thinks about it, whether or not it was justified, whether Iran really had a nuclear weapon, how close they were to getting one, whether we should be trying to prevent them or not, the means we should use. Whatever you think about that, I think you and I can both agree that, come November, if gas prices are still very high and the prices of household goods are still very high, the Republicans have got a problem. You know what I'm saying? It's like if the prices can get back down and the economy can really pick up and if people start to get some relief, then it's possible that by November people won't really remember, right? They won't take it to heart that we went to war with Iran. But if they're paying $5-6 a gallon at the pump in November, it's not looking good, even with the redistricting.
Yeah, the economy was the biggest issue in 2024 during the presidential election, and the reason why most people voted for Donald Trump, because they felt like he would have done a better job with the economy than Joe Biden. So the Republicans do have a real issue on their hand. Gas, the national average for gas right now is $4.56, which is $1 more than it was last year. Grocery prices have gone up. The electronic prices have gone up. The price of computer memory it's astronomical. Someone had posted on Twitter/X that the cost of RAM, of over 100 gigabytes of RAM, costs more than an AR-15. And I laughed. I'm like, the AR-15 is probably one of the most affordable rifles in America. So of course it costs more, but it is what it is. Using 100 gigabytes of RAM, you must be doing something. You must be doing something like extensive, like you must be running a podcast or something like that. I don't know. But yeah. The economy is not in the greatest of shape. However, from what I've heard from economists and pundits, be patient. These tariffs and other things will pay off. That's what they said. That's not me. I don't know what the future is, so we'll see. That's all I'll say. I'm gonna be patient, but we will see.
Yep, exactly. And let's hope it does pay off sooner rather than later. I mean, I think if anyone, put it this way, if anyone can beat the historical trend of the party in power losing one or both houses of Congress during the midterms, if anyone can beat that trend, it's Republicans under Trump, right? You know, let's admit, whatever you think about him, the fact that he's an unorthodox political operator, he understands power and how to use it, and he's lucky. The man is just lucky. You know what I'm saying?
He really is.
I mean, it's crazy. I mean, aside from the fact that they stay shooting at this dude, you know, they stay trying to kill him. He's just, you know, he's a lucky guy.
That is crazy.
So we'll see.
I said on Twitter before my account got hacked that Trump might as well just release a rap album at this point, because how many times, you know, people have tried to shoot him.
He might as well what at this point?
Release a rap album. You know how many rappers have mentioned his name in the past, so it's like at this point he's right up there with him getting shot at.
Listen, don't give him any ideas. Okay, let's keep him focused. Anyway, I just heard Minute Maid. I'm going to drop. I've got a couple more kind of news notes before we jump into our main topic, and then we'll be off to the races.
All right, man. I'll see you on the other side of the break. Hey, what's up, everybody? Once again, you're joining us on the Hidden Path. I thank you for being here. We do this every Monday at 7 p.m. We're doing it today. I know today is Friday, but I had a medical emergency on Sunday, this past Sunday. I had a seizure, so I wasn't in my right mind to do the show Monday, but we're doing a special presentation here on Friday because we don't want to leave you hanging. We want to bring you some great content, and hopefully you sit back, relax on a Friday evening and enjoy us talking about everybody's favorite dollar store Obama, Hakeem Jeffries. That's the topic tonight. But before we get into that, we're going to talk about some quick topics that is on both me and Dester's mind. Carbon Mike will be back. He had to hang up. If you're joining us for the first time, let me say welcome. So Dester, my co-host, is in prison right now. If you don't know the story, he's in prison because of New York's law against freedom. Yeah, I said that. Basically, Dester didn't do anything wrong, but because Dester didn't have a permit for guns that he had already built before New York decided that he needed a permit, yes, they passed the law retroactively. Because of that, Dester was arrested and thrown in jail, went to trial, wasn't allowed to plead his case on Second Amendment grounds, even though the Second Amendment is the law of the land and part of the Bill of Rights. Dester was basically railroaded by the justice system of New York City. He is now serving 10 years in prison. So weekly, me and Dester does this show, and he calls me from prison. And through the magic of technology, I am able to use some podcasting equipment to get Dester in on the show. So,
hello, this is a free
right
call
now, and you can listen to the recording and hear what it says.
Telephone constitutes consent and your call may be provided to law enforcement agencies. To accept this free call, press 1. To refuse this free call.
Preventing suicide is important. If you have concerns during this call, please contact the individual's facility to communicate with them.
Thank you for using Securus. You may start the conversation now.
All right. Welcome back, Dexter. We are here on the Hidden Path, and we're still talking hot topics right now. What is else on your mind, Dexter? What else is going on inside the world of conservatism?
Well, let's see. We got I don't know if this qualifies as conservatism, but some interesting things across the ocean from the U.S. Let's see. France is seeking charges against Elon Musk and X/Twitter. I believe they changed the name like that stupid name. Because apparently, X's proprietary AI has been that's Grok, correct?
Yeah.
I'm never actually
Grok.
Yeah, so that's Grok. Yeah, so Grok and I guess the image generation engine built in onto Grok, or as part of Grok, has from time to time generated kind of sexually explicit images. Some of them involving children, some of them involving, kind of innocent bystanders, so to speak. And then, France has a problem with that. Well, we should all have a problem with that, but France, for some reason, thinks that rises to the level of criminal behavior on the part of Elon Musk. That I think is strange. And also, let's see, one of the charges that they're looking to bring against him is something they call denial of crimes against humanity.
That's an interesting charge.
That's a very interesting charge. Denial of crimes, not committing them, just denying that they happen. But this is one of the reasons why when people say, I mean, look, again, the specific thing with X and generating sexual images, that's a separate matter. Yes, I gather that all these AIs will do disgusting things if they're allowed. And the whole thing with I guess Grok or any other AI occasionally generating or regenerating texts that say or imply that such and such an act of such and such an atrocity never happened. We might all have a problem with that, but the fact is, I'm struggling to figure out why a government feels the need to get involved in that, right? And so when people talk to me about Europe, like again, you can imagine, right? Well, maybe you don't have to imagine. As pro-2A conservatives, right? Every now and then, liberals will jump up and point across the water and say, "Well, look at Europe. It's so wonderful over there." Right? They've disarmed all the people, and it's just great. I'm like, yeah, but they do have an odd relationship toward freedom of speech. I mean, we just have to admit that.
And let's be honest, France is not as safe as it tries to make itself seem. The worst terrorist attack in France's history involved a Mack truck, where it's Islamic extremists drove a Mack truck through a celebration that was going on in France. I forgot the name of the celebration, but it was in Nice, France, and it killed 86 people. 86 people. The worst mass shooting here was like 62 or 61 people killed in Las Vegas. But, France is not really cares about his people there, is what I'm saying.
Well, apparently not. I mean, there was another massacre that happened in France. I thought that was the worst. I think it was, I'm pretty sure this was France.
The Charlie Hebdo shooting?
No. This was at, I remember that too. But this was at some kind of stadium.
Oh, yeah. You're talking about the Bakled.
Bataclan massacre.
Yeah, the Blockline massacre. Yeah.
Bataclan. Yeah,
Yeah,
Bataclan.
that is the worst. My bad. That is the worst.
I thought that was the worst. Right. Yeah, that's that was crazy. Again, it's at this point, right? I mean, you get tired of explaining to people after a while that the right to keep and bear arms is not something we're trying out to see if it works. It is a fundamental human right,
Right.
and one of the reasons it's important is because governments get out of control. But another reason it's important is because other human beings will get out of control, and you do not want to have to wait until the government gets there to save you. So it is what it is. But yes, France is looking to bring charges because a stack of computers running software generated things that we may find offensive, which again, whether or not those things are offensive is a separate matter. I do find them offensive. I mean, I find people who deny the Holocaust, for example, I find all of those people rather silly. But again, that's you have a right to your stupid opinion. You know what I'm saying? You have a right to your stupid opinion. But that's you for you. Let's see what else over the water. Well, speaking of terrorist attacks, as you mentioned a short time ago, in Australia, a handful of ISIS brides and their children have just come back from being in the Middle East. I think they were in Syria. These were women who became involved and or married guys who were part of Islamic State, and I guess they went over there to provide the comfort and support to their boyfriends or husbands, and they got stuck over there. And at a certain point, I think some of them were detained. These particular women in this repatriation to Australia had been detained by Kurdish authorities, and now they're back in Australia, and some or all of them are facing charges. I think one of the women is facing charges that she and her husband or boyfriend actually bought a slave while they were over there, and basically had a slave working for them in their house.
Damn.
I mean, listen, if once you decide to be a degenerate,
not Australia.
Anything is possible. No, not in Australia. This was in Syria.
Yeah, but they was Australians, right?
They were Australians. Well, they were Australians. Yes, I mean they were Middle East. I mean, if you could look at their names, they were Middle Easterners who immigrated to Australia and were.
See, I thought it was
Australian citizens.
I thought it was like an Australian national, like someone who born and raised there, went to the Middle East and bought a slave. I was about to say, not, progressive Australia.
No, it wasn't like that. These were people who were kind of, I guess they were steeped in whatever ideology. And again, they were from the Middle East to begin with. If I'm to judge by their names in the news story, and hooked up with some dude who was an ISIS fighter who wanted to be, ended up took their asses to Syria and got stuck. There was something that happened while I was still outside. It was a couple of years ago. In the UK, there was some young woman who Shamina Begum, I think was her name. Same thing, got involved with some dude, either in real life or online, and he was over there fighting, and she was like, I'm going to go in there too, and had a couple of kids watching. He gets killed, right? And she's bouncing around from one place to another in refugee camps, so on and so forth, and she's trying to get back, quote unquote, home to the UK, and of course the UK is like, well, we don't want her. And it was, I don't know how the thing actually shook out, but at the time it was a thing about, well, does the UK have the right to uncitizen its citizens, because she was a UK citizen. And I'm still trying to figure out what I think about that. if under what circumstances can a government revoke the citizenship of one of its citizens? But what I can say is, just as a friendly note of advice, you know what I'm saying? Like, don't put a government bureaucrat in a position where he can make his life easier by revoking your citizenship. Don't do that. You're stuck in some godforsaken hellhole refugee camp. You want to get home to a place where you've got indoor plumbing and infrastructure and all this shit. And they're like, yeah, we don't want you back. That's a problem,
That is a problem.
So, yeah. So it is what it is. And then my last news note is that Ted Turner passed.
Oh yeah, I saw that in the news.
This week, Wednesday. Yeah, Ted Turner passed away. And of course, I guess he's most famous as the founder of CNN. Back in the 1980s, he founded this 24-hour news channel, which at the time was a brand new kind of thing. You didn't have 24-hour news really before CNN. It was quite a thing. I mean, CNN was on hand for all kinds of history-making events, even when some of the established news networks were not. So it was an interesting thing to read about the passing of Ted Turner. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when you had like 4 television channels.
Right.
Right. You had ABC, CBS, NBC, and public TV, and like there was a time when they didn't even broadcast all 24 hours. Right? They'd sign off at a certain time of night or whatever. So the founding of CNN and the 24-hour news was definitely a watershed moment. Hasn't always been for the better. Definitely not.
Definitely not now.
But it's interesting. Yeah, definitely not now. Well, at a certain point, Ted Turner, I think he sold his remaining interest in controlling interest in CNN and went on to do other things.
He sold it to AOL, I think. I think AOL owned them for a while.
Yeah.
And he even said that he advised against the board selling to AOL, but he at that time didn't have controlling interest of CNN. So.
Right. There you go. So
had no other choice.
It is what it is. Mm-hmm. That's right. So yeah, R.I.P. Ted Turner.
Yeah, rest in peace to Ted Turner. Fun fact: he is the 4th largest landowner in America. Ted Turner.
No kidding.
Yeah, he owned a lot of land. He was a big person when it came to wildlife, preserving wildlife and natural habitats. So he owned a lot of land and raised a lot of animals on his land. So shout out to him.
That's cool. And I forgot one more thing in my news notes. Hantavirus.
Oh yeah.
Hantavirus.
Yeah. For those who don't know what that virus is, that is the virus that killed Gene Hackman and his wife. So if you want a context of what that virus is, that's the virus that ultimately did him and his wife in.
Yeah. It is spread by rodents, possibly by other vectors too, but rodents are the big one.
Not Democrats, not the Democrat rodents.
Damn, you cold as ice. I was thinking of working Hakeem Jeffries in there somehow, but then the moment escaped me. But you got it. You got it. So all good. This outbreak happened on board a cruise ship, and I think 3 people lost their lives in this initial outbreak, but I think there's another cruise ship where there's also been some hantavirus cases. In any case, this is one of the many viruses that are out there that can do humans harm. And so, people are taking steps to doing contact tracing. Who are these people close to? When they left, when they got on planes to go back to their native countries, so on and so forth. People who who were afflicted and survived. Yeah, I mean, look, fact is that people get sick and die, and that is a thing that happens to us, and the thing to always remember is that it's we can be, what can be even more dangerous than the actual pathogen that's causing harm is overreaction. Overreaction and government-fostered panic and turning society into a petri dish for your stupid ideas, and pushing drugs on people and all that other business that we saw not that long ago. So, yes, at the end of the day, people, to live in the world means to be a hostage to fate to some extent. But to keep your wits about you. And that's it.
All right, let's get into the topic of today. Most of you know him as Dollar Store Obama. We're talking about Hakeem.
I they used to call him that.
Yeah, that's what Crystal, our good friend Crystal, called him. Dollar Store Obama.
Crystal.
Hakeem Jeffries is a man who has been gaining a lot of attention. Most see him as a potential nominee for the Democrat Party for president in 2028. Others see him as a man who is trying to follow in the footsteps of Barack Obama, the 44th president of the United States. Hakeem Jeffries has been in the news a lot. One of the things that he was in the news for is firing back at our governor, my governor here in Florida, Ron DeSantis, because Florida has redrawn our districts as well, just like Virginia and Texas, to favor more Republicans, and which goes against our Constitution as well. But, there's some legal maneuvering that they're doing here in Florida to kind of like push that in a legal way. Just for those who don't know, this is what Hakeem Jeffries said.
Same situation as Texas Republicans, who are on the run right now, and under no circumstances are Texas Republicans picking up 5 seats. They'll be fortunate if they get 2 or 3. While in California, we are going to get all 5. The Republicans are dummy mandering their way into the minority before a single vote is cast, because they started this war, and we're going to finish it. This guy Jeffries popping off in Washington about Florida. He wants to be Speaker of the House, and he's kind of like, more liberal than Pelosi and all this other stuff from New York City. I just want to know, Florida, go after Florida. Please be my guest. I will pay for you to come down to Florida and campaign. I'll put you up in the Florida governor's mansion. We'll take you fishing. We'll do all this stuff. There's nothing that could be better for Republicans in Florida than to see Hakeem Jeffries, everywhere around this state. Hakeem Jeffries.
All right, that was Hakeem Jeffries and Ron DeSantis responding to him. But Dexter, what are your thoughts on Hakeem Jeffries?
Well, where do we start? Well, I know a good place to start is just let's sketch out this character a little. But before I do that, I just want to say, that people will have whatever opinions about the redistricting and how, whether Republicans, whether Trump is leading Republicans to political suicide by urging them to redraw their maps before the midterms. I would just point out that if it seems to me that certain political suicide for Republicans, right? And if Hakeem Jeffries, we got background noise.
You hearing background noise?
We got background noise. Yeah. Oh, it stopped. It sounded like you played an audio file or something. So yeah, I think if this redistricting on the part of Republicans is really a political suicide, and Hakeem Jeffries is not a silly man, then he wouldn't be upset by it, right? I mean, in other words, for someone who wants the Democrats to get back into power, and for someone who thinks that Republican redistricting is going to kick Republicans out of power, he seems awfully upset.
The caller has hung up.
Apologies, everyone. Live, broadcasting does have its pitfalls. Dexter unfortunately disconnected. He should be calling back pretty soon. But again, we're on the Hidden Paths with Carbon Mike. I'm your host, Carl. Carbon Mike will be calling us back. We are talking about Hakeem Jeffries and his many pitfalls of being the House Minority Leader. He is the one that replaced Nancy Pelosi. So if the Democrats take the House, he will be the Speaker of the House this year. Hopefully that does not happen. I'm hoping that does not happen. I'm going to play a few more clips from Hakeem Jeffries. Just give me a second here. In case that audio was a little fuzzy that I played previously, I'm going to replay it. This is what Hakeem Jeffries had to say about Florida Republicans gerrymandering Florida to weed out more Democrat districts.
If they go down the road of a DeSantis dummy-mander, the Florida Republicans are going to find themselves in the same situation as Texas Republicans, who are on the run right now. And under no circumstances are Texas Republicans picking up 5 seats. They'll be fortunate if they get 2 or 3. While in California, we are going to get all 5. The Republicans are dummy-mandering their way into the minority before a single vote is cast because they started this war. And we're going to finish it.
This guy Jeffries popping off.
So that was Hakeem Jeffries talking about Florida starting a war of gerrymandering, which I find ironic since both parties have been doing it for decades. Both parties draw districts in a way that favors the controlling party of the state. So if you're in California, where it's Democrat run, California is going to draw their districts to favor more Democrats, to put Democrats into the House and have the Democrats party's platform's interests. Same thing in Republicans. With Republicans, if you're in Texas or Florida, both states are controlled by the Republicans. They're going to draw the districts in a way that favors the Republicans. So I don't understand why he's so upset as if this is new. Well, I do understand. Let's be honest. It's political theater. These people are performing for you. They're acting like they're mad. They're acting like this is a travesty because they hope that you don't know any better, that you haven't done your research. That's why it pays to be intellectual about these things. It pays to do your research and know your history about these things because, like I said, gerrymandering has been a thing. This is why I do not like the two-party system. This is why I don't call myself a Republican. I don't call myself a Democrat. I do call myself a conservative. All right.
Hello.
Dexter is calling back.
Call from.
So we're going to find out what happened and then get him on the
An
line.
incarcerated individual at New York State Department of Corrections and Community Supervision.
This is the recording, by the way, that I hear all the
recording
time.
and monitoring.
It's annoying.
An incarcerated individual's use of institutional telephones constitutes consent and your calls made to law enforcement agencies.
To accept this free call, press 1. To refuse this free call, press 2. Preventing suicide is important. If you have concerns during this call, please contact the individual's facility to communicate with them.
Thank you for using Securus. You may start the call now.
All right. That's
All right, we're back.
Carbon Mike is back,
Yeah.
everyone. Sorry about that technical difficulty. You good, brother?
That was probably on my. Yeah, I'm good to go. I think that was probably a difficulty on my side. Yeah, this is a Democrat-run telephone network.
Yeah, they heard you talking about their fearless leader, and they decided to cut the call.
Oh my God!
It's like we can't have this intelligent brothers talking. We got to cut the call.
No, that won't do. We got to cut this.
Yeah.
You off it. Yeah. So Hakeem Jeffries. What I was saying before was, it's kind of a well-known principle, right, of, warfare and also political warfare, right? And I think it was Napoleon Bonaparte who said it first, never interrupt your enemy while he's making a mistake. But somehow Hakeem Jeffries seems to think the Republicans are making a mistake, but nonetheless, he's upset about it. That by itself should tell us something. But on to the man himself. He's a Brooklynite. Was born in Brooklyn, same year as I was born. So we're the same age pretty much. He's raised in Crown Heights, which back in the 1970s was an especially bad part of New York, and which is saying a lot because New York had a lot of problems with crime back in the 80s. A lot of drugs, a lot of gangs, street crime, muggings, so on and so forth. Church man. Lifelong member of the Cornerstone Baptist Church in Brooklyn, lives in a very kind of prosperous section of Brooklyn now. I won't say which one, but yeah, he's living in Brooklyn where the money people are. He's got a brother who's a historian and teaches at Ohio State. His brother specializes in African American history and civil rights, which I think is fascinating. More on that later. His uncle Leonard Jeffries used to be something of a radio personality, I believe. He either hosted or guested on a particular radio show on an AM station called WLIB. 1190 WLIB, and back in the day. A lot of interesting kind of political stuff. There's some kind of people you only hear on WLIB. And I remember hearing Leonard Jeffries his thing on the radio from time to time back in the 90s. Let's see. Went to school, bachelor's in political science with honors from SUNY, got his master's at Georgetown in public policy, went to NYU Law School, graduated with full honors, and did some time as a federal clerk in the U.S. District Court, the Southern District. And then went to work for 10 years. He was kind of in the private sector, the private legal sector. He was an attorney, so did some stuff for a couple of corporate law firms. And then in 2007 was when he was elected to the New York State Assembly for the 57th District, which is in Brooklyn. He served 3 terms as a New York State Assemblyman, and then was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives for the New York's 8th CD, 8th Congressional District. And he's been in that job for 7 terms. Let's see, most recently, he was the chairman of the House Democratic Caucus from 2019 to 2023. He was chair of that caucus, and then from 2023 to now, he was the House Minority Leader, first Black lawmaker to lead a major party in Congress. So that's Hakeem Jeffries. He is, he's very much what you might call a Democrat's Democrat, right? He's very much into gun control. He's very much against legitimate self-defense. He's very much for not enforcing immigration laws and not controlling our borders. And yeah, he's I mentioned his brother who teaches Black history and civil rights. I just find it very interesting because this guy is really, really, really against one particular civil rights and he is very much kind of, given his gun control history, you could argue that he's very much in the tank for white supremacy, given that gun control is by definition white supremacy. It is the dead hand of white supremacy today, right, in our streets, in our towns, in our counties, in our cities. That is what it is. Okay? And if you braced him on it, he might argue that he wants people to be safe and, all the usual business. But the fact is, you look at his record, on board with every time the so-called assault weapons ban came to the floor, wants greater government intrusion into private firearm sales, the so-called gun show loophole, Bipartisan Safe for Communities Act. He was all for the Break the Flag Act, which is basically paying New York Democrats $5 billion for quote-unquote violence interruption programs. I think that's fascinating. Democrats are for interrupting violence. They're for interrupting violence as long as you don't try to interrupt the violence by defending yourself against it. That's what when Democrats mean violence interruption, they do not mean that you should interrupt the violence that you're being victimized by. That they don't like. So Everytown for Gun Safety, which is a gun grabbing organization, has voted him Federal Gun Sense Lawmaker of the Year. God forbid. And this is Michael Bloomberg's organization, which I'll talk more about in a second. The NRA, which, to be fair, the NRA these days is about as useful as tits on a pole, but the NRA did rate them, give him an F rating. He's no friend of the Second Amendment. That should be obvious. A little bit more about Bloomberg and Hakeem Jeffries. So Everytown for Gun Safety loves Hakeem Jeffries because Hakeem Jeffries is a gun grabber. Everytown for Gun Safety is kind of Michael Bloomberg's pet organization. Michael Bloomberg is, aside from being a rated gun grabber, is also perfectly free to go after the Fourth Amendment rights of New Yorkers, especially Black New Yorkers, because Michael Bloomberg was all on board with stop and frisk, so-called stop and frisk policing, which I've argued before is not really a kind of policing at all. But Mike Bloomberg was on board with it. And, again, Hakeem Jeffries is all on board with that. We have no record of Mr. Jeffries taking advantage of his brother's scholarship in Black history and civil rights. We have no record of Hakeem Jeffries pointing out that actually Black arms have been crucial to the preservation of Black civil rights in America since the end of the Civil War. Nothing from him about that. Not surprising. Let's see. Anything else in my notes here? Well, let's see. The longest speech in House history was delivered by Hakeem Jeffries. He spoke for 8 3/4 hours against the Big Beautiful Bill Act. And Yeah, in that speech, he, of course, never talked about the Second Amendment or anything. The one time, at least in recent memory, that I remember him saying anything about the Second Amendment was when he got kind of weepy about the recent unpleasantness in Minneapolis. The incident in question was one in which Alex Preddy, Mr. Alex Preddy, rest in peace, decided to get into a fist fight with armed federal agents. Mr. Alex Preddy was actually carrying at the time, which by itself isn't a problem, at least in my opinion. But the fact that he was carrying and he got into a gunfight with federal law enforcement agents, armed agents, and that he got himself shot, that's what generated the headlines. That was the tragedy. That's the thing that Hakeem Jeffries chose to speak up about. And when he did, he said that, you know, this shows that Donald Trump doesn't care about the Second Amendment. I mean, that's if there's one kind of like historical picture I could draw, right, that demonstrates the kind of rank hypocrisy of this man, is that on the one side, whether you like him or not, you have a president who has been shot at and has still taken really almost unprecedented steps to help defend the civil rights of American citizens, particularly their right to keep and bear arms. And on the other hand, you have Hakeem Jeffries, who has sat by while Black Americans' Fourth Amendment rights were systematically violated by a tyrannical mayor, and has thrown a lot of his energy into depriving Americans of the right to defend themselves. And here someone gets shot in a state halfway across the country. And that's the only time you hear him say anything that sounds like support from the Second Amendment. This is the caliber of political hack that we are dealing with in Mr. Hakeem Jeffries. And I'll pause there.
Yeah, I want to play a clip for you and the audience. Some of the things that Hakeem Jeffrey has said regarding the Second Amendment and firearms.
We had a very passionate.
All right, here we go.
Good morning, everyone. We had a very passion-filled caucus this morning discussing the crisis that has befallen America with respect to this gun violence epidemic that has clearly been with us for far too long. And it's past time that the Congress, particularly the Senate, that the Congress act to crush this gun violence epidemic here in America. A gun violence epidemic that should shock the conscience and has devastated children, lives, families, and communities over and over and over again. We can either respond or we can ignore the crisis and act as if everything is okay. House Democrats are going to respond, as we've consistently done, with the fierce urgency of now. It's unacceptable that in the United States of America, gun violence is the leading cause of death for children. That's unacceptable. Why do we have 4% of the world's population, more than 40% of the world's guns, the only developed nation in the world that has more guns than people? Isn't it reasonable to do everything that we can to make sure that those guns don't fall into the hands of individuals intent on inflicting carnage on children, communities, families? loved ones, for the people of the United States of America? Shouldn't we do everything possible to stop the carnage? That's exactly what House Democrats are going to do today. I'm thankful for the leadership of all of the members of the caucus, but in particular, Representative McBath and Representative Thompson, who we'll hear from momentarily. I'm hopeful that at least some of our Republican colleagues will do the right thing. Stop burying your head in the sands. Respond to.
Okay, that's I can only stomach so much of that. That was Hakeem Jeffries talking about a House bill that he was trying to introduce. This was shortly following the shooting in Nashville. A mass shooting in Nashville, rather. Like I was saying, Hakeem Jeffries is not a friend to the Second Amendment. Notably, he had the mother of Jordan Davis, who is also a member of Congress. Jordan Davis, if you remember, it was a teenager who was shot and killed by I wouldn't call him an angry motorist. He was more of a guy who, had a little bit of racist feelings. It was a famous case here in Jacksonville, Florida, where he shot Jordan Davis over loud music. His mom is now a staunch advocate for gun control, and she is in Congress. Couple of notes he said in the video that I wanted to point out. He said that House Republicans are not doing anything to address gun violence. Now, violence is violence, right? That's the there's the tool should be irrelevant. Like if someone is acting violent towards you, the tool should be politicized in a way that Hakeem Jeffries is doing. It should be addressed holistically. It should be addressed systemically, and how he's addressing it is by, pushing political narratives and, formative in a performative way. So what do you got to say to all of the things that you heard in that clip?
Well, let me push back a little bit. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with politicizing. Look, if we're talking about government and what government should do, we're talking about government policy, right? Then the fact is that we have to politicize things because the political process, right? Politics is at least notionally how we decide on government policy, right? So it's not that my problem with him is not that he's politicizing an act of violence or more than one act of violence or the conditions in the streets. If we admit that these things have a solution that is at least in part political, then by all means politicize away. My real problem with that's my first pushback. My other pushback is this. I would say that you mentioned addressing the problem systemically. But you see, one of my big problems with Hakeem Jeffries is that even when he was in a position to do so, he didn't even address the problem locally, right? The problem being, broken families broken by violence, children affected by violence, and so on and so forth. He didn't even address the problem locally. That is, he was originally, when he was hired to be in government, okay, he was not hired to be he wasn't hired in a federal systemic role. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And my problem with him is that he didn't even see fit to try to address the local issues that you could argue he was at least partially responsible for. Now, let's dig into that. What I mean by that? Well, if you look at crime in America's major cities. Let's just take the major cities, right? Let's put to one side the occasional shooting that might happen at a public event, a baseball game, right? Something. Let's put those aside for 1 second. Even schools, schools from in the suburbs, something. Let's put those to one side for just a moment, and let's just talk about, right, violence in America's big cities. We're talking, Los Angeles, New York, Chicago, East St. Louis, Baltimore, and so on and so forth. In my opinion, and in a lot of us, Carl, and not just Republicans either, not just conservatives either, in the opinion of a lot of us, what we have had is a kind of a fundamental civic breakdown in our communities, in communities that have been blighted by poverty and violence. Okay? And much of this this breakdown really began to happen in, let's say, the 50s, 60s, 70s, especially in the 60s and 70s. And this breakdown coincided with this program that the government had to kind of replace the family with the state and to subsidize illegitimacy, right? And what is interesting is that Hakeem Jeffries, never saw fit to address any of this. That is, he never saw fit to get to the bottom of what is happening in our cities, why we have so many young men running around who don't know how to act, right? Why we have so many problems with gangs and drugs and so on and so forth, right? He has focused. He focused on what is for a lawmaker, right, the easiest part of it, which is just the instrument. He said, "Well, you know something? Yes, I know that that there's this breakdown in our city and this and that, and we have broken things up. But there's this instrument, there's this object, and if I focus on this object, everything else will be all right." That's the impression I get from listening to Hakeem Jeffries. Right? Now, most of the homicides that happen in a city like New York or Chicago, most of these homicides are being committed with ordinary pistols, either revolvers or semi-automatics. Okay, and they're being committed by young people who are very often gang affiliated, right? And they're being committed by people who are kind of known to the criminal justice system, who have criminal records, have lengthy criminal records. Okay, that when I did that Hidden Path episode, this was the old Hidden Path when I was outside. I researched a handful of them of defensive gun use cases, and I found that invariably what you find is that the people who are being defended against, or the aggressor, the criminal aggressor in this case, has a criminal record a mile long. Okay, none of this really matters to Hakeem Jeffries and people like Hakeem Jeffries. It's just the instrument. Now, that's one problem. The other problem is that in all his talk about guns and gun violence, this and that, he never seems to want to address the fact that law-abiding citizens who, for whatever reason, are forced to live in cities run by Democrats, that is, to live in cities that have been run into the ground since the 60s and 70s. He seems never to acknowledge that people who live in these cities have a legitimate need to defend themselves, not necessarily against the tyranny of governments, but against the tyranny of local drug kingpins or gang members or gang leaders or armed robbers or rapists. Right? He seems not to acknowledge that. Of course, that's natural because he's a Democrat, and that's That's the Democrat Party line. But, by no means should you pay attention to the fact that law-abiding citizens have perfectly legitimate uses for firearms and for armed self-defense. And that's one of my biggest problems with Hakeem Jeffrey. If he had shown any nuance, again, politicizing the thing, of course, like I said, politicize away because you're talking about making policy. So let's absolutely politicize it. Let's talk about it. Let's fight about it. Let's argue about it. My problem is that he seems to have tunnel vision for this instrument. Because it seems to be, depending on who's in power, it's the easiest thing in the world for Democrat politicians to make life hard for law-abiding gun owners. Right? Because, of course, additional firearm restrictions and more stringent firearm laws, really, that's who's affected by it. People who are known to the police, people who are out there shooting up the place now, are doing something that is illegal now. Right? It's illegal to rob someone at gunpoint. It's illegal to rob someone at knife point. It's illegal to rob someone at all. Right? So, when he talks about more stringent gun laws, remember, he is specifically targeting this remedy, this thing that he says is a solution. He's targeting this to people who do not have a habit of breaking the law. That should be obvious. Okay? Because the criminals don't care about laws across the board. They don't care about the law that says you can't steal from another person. They're not going to care about the law that says you can't steal from someone at gunpoint. Obviously. And if it's about the access, the availability of these weapons, well, everyone who lives in a place like New York or the South Side of Chicago knows that everyone who wants to get a gun and shoot up the place can. It's just a money question. That's all it is.
Yep.
They don't have to go to Westlaw and say, what does New York corrections, what does your criminal code say about having a firearm? We better check that before we go and shoot it out with so and so across the way. Nobody says that. Okay, because it's not interesting to them. Okay, it's like, I need a piece because X, Y, Z, and that's it. So again, I just want to point out, and I think that, look, we can have, and we should have, spirited political discussions, debates, arguments, fights about firearms, about the role that the government should or should not play in terms of regulating firearms. But if you believe that the answer to the quote unquote gun violence problem, if you believe the answer to that is to make life difficult for people who have never been violent and who are not criminals, right? If you think the answer to crime, if you think the answer to crime is to make life harder for non-criminals, then we have nothing to talk about. Rational discussion is impossible because it just doesn't make any sense. And so my first indictment of Hakeem Jeffries is that he is ridiculous on his face. He does not make sense when he talks. You understand what I'm saying? I would very much like to be able to engage with him, right, at this remove, on some kind of point of reason, right? Something that I could get my teeth into. But the fact is he is started from a point of unreason. He said, we have a crime problem, which is correct, which is true. And then he said, we need to inflict as much suffering on difficulty. We need to inflict as much difficulty on non-criminals as possible to solve our crime problem. Carl, where do you go with that? How do I even jump into that argument? It's not possible. So that's problem one with Hakeem Jeffries. And speaking of Democrats, there's our favorite Democrat, Minute Maid, reminding us of the 1 minute deadline. I'm going to drop and catch you on the rebound.
All right, man. See you on the other side. All right, you're listening to the Hidden Pass with Carbon Mike.
The caller has hung up.
Carbon Mike will be rejoining us in just a moment. He has to hang up. Every 30 minutes, Minute Maid, you heard him mention her, and you heard her say you have 1 minute left. What she is referring to is 1 minute left in the call. Dexter has to call back every 30 minutes, and we go up until about 11 o'clock, but the show lasts about to 10. So he calls us back. I go through this long diatribe trying to get him on the line because of the prompts that I have to go through when the call is connected. So just bear with us. One thing that Dexter said that I do agree with is that criminals don't follow laws. These laws are designed for the people who will follow them, not the people that they tell you it's designed for. It is designed for law-abiding citizens, the compliant ones, the ones that say, hey, I'm going to follow every law because I don't want to get in trouble. But there are people out there who see laws as a risk-reward type of situation. Well, they see, hey, what is the risk involved if I commit this crime? The risk may be I go to jail for about 5, 10, 15 years. Maybe I get a lenient judge or a weak prosecutor and they only give me 5 years. But the reward is, hey, I get to rape this woman, or I get to invade this home, or I get to steal this car, something violent. They don't care. So they're like, hey, I'm only going to get 5 years if I'm caught. I'm only going to get 15 years if I'm caught. I don't care about that. So they commit the crime. And they target you because they know you're compliant. They know that you're following the law. They know that you're not going to, do the necessary steps like pay for a class so you can get a gun permit so you can purchase a gun. That's too time consuming. That's too much money. So therefore, you're not going to do it. You're going to go about your life. You don't need a gun in your daily life anyway, right? Wrong. These people target people like you. Hey, I was one of them. I thought I didn't need a gun. Before I ever became a gun advocate, or built a gun collection, I was a Democrat who thought like that. And for my troubles, I was shot during a home invasion. Now I'm a gun rights advocate and I own a bunch of guns. This is why I'm so passionate about being a gun advocate. It's because I understand the risks involved not being one. But let's get back to Dexter.
Conversation now.
All right. Welcome back, Mr. Carbon Mike. Again, you're listening to The Hidden Path with Carbon Mike. We're talking about everybody's favorite Dollar General Obama, Hakeem Jeffries. We were just talking about some gun control that he is pushing. And I was telling the audience Dexter during the break that most gun control that Hakeem Jeffries and other Democrats are pushing is designed for the law-abiding, compliant citizen. It is not designed for the people that they are telling you it's designed for, which is the criminal, the mentally insane, things like that. They like to get up on stage and say, well, we want to keep guns out of the hands of those people. But like you explained, those people get those guns through the black market. If they really want to get a gun in America, where a country where more, and this is an estimate, everyone, more than 500 million guns are in circulation, they can definitely get one. But, Democrats like to think that, these people are going up to your local gun store and, filling out the 4473 and these background checks are keeping guns out of the hands of those people. It is not. It is keeping guns out of the hands of the mom who is a single mom who may live in a rough area who wants to purchase a firearm because she doesn't want to be robbed on the way to work. But Democrats stack the deck against her and prevent her from being able to get a gun because they make it more time consuming or costly, something that she may not be able to afford. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Right. Well, sure. I mean, look, again, I touched in the last segment. I touched on this idea that in as much as the Second Amendment was written with an eye toward tyranny, we have to understand that tyranny does not always come from the government. Often it just comes from the wicked who wish to impose their will on us, right? Who wish to harm us, who wish to steal our property, who wish to transgress against our homes, our families, our loved ones, our businesses, so on and so forth. And, of course, the Second Amendment doesn't confer the right to bear arms upon us. It merely acknowledges that right is pre-existing. Mm-hmm. Right? That it is a sacred human right and that it is one that the government shall not infringe upon. Now, you talked about, the young woman living in a rough part of town who wants to be able to defend herself. The fact is that, I don't know if that's still the case, but I think a year or so ago, we saw numbers that indicated that one of the fastest growing new gun user demographics was single young women living in big cities, right? Not surprising. You know what I'm saying? Of course, it makes perfect sense. And by the way, you're a Floridian. I read this statistic some time ago that in, I believe it was Orlando, when the Orlando PD started a violence prevention program, right? Mm-hmm. By offering free firearms training to young women who lived in the city. I believe in the first year of that program, the incidence of rape went down by some extraordinary number. I think it was by more than 60 or 70%.
Yeah, that was actually decades ago. Okay. Yeah, right. It was right. Orlando had a rash of like a string of rapes in the 90s. Mm-hmm. And the Orlando PD offered self-defense classes and firearms training to young women in the city. But currently Orlando is the number one place for sex trafficking. So that's another thing. Yeah, that's another thing to think about if you're a young woman living in Orlando right now.
Well, look, I mean, the fact is that most of, as my understanding is, that most of the women who are sex trafficked are not snatched off the streets of the United States. They're being brought across the border, right? Mm-hmm. The same border that Hakeem Jeffries has a big problem with securing. You see,
right?
So, right. So I mean, all across the board. I mean, let's go back to the original thing, right? What is the problem with Hakeem Jeffries? Well, how much time do you have? Well, so the first problem is that he's not willing to look at the problem for what it is, right? That is, he does not look at the breakdown of civic society, right? He doesn't look at the breakdown of order in our cities as being a fundamental problem. He looks at a type of instrument as being a fundamental problem, right? That's one of the many flaws in his thinking. In fact, I think there's even a quote that I have in my notes. Let's see. Yes, too many, quote unquote, Too many illegal weapons are purchased in the South and make their way up to New York City by way of the iron pipeline. Right? So, according to Hakeem Jeffries and others, and we know this might be true, there is some kind of, a clandestine pipeline by which guns kind of stream into places like New York from
not
wait a minute. No, tell me.
No, I was going to say, that's the only problem that I have with that Hakeem Jeffries and other Democrats, because I've heard this argument a lot. Whenever they have a reduction in violent crime or like reduction in gun crime, they always tout that it was the gun laws that stopped it. But when there's a rise, they blame it on the pipeline.
Other states. That's right. Exactly. Right. So that's a very good point. And I'm glad you brought that up. But the reason I brought that up was to demonstrate how Hakeem Jeffries and people like him have given up on the actual people that he's supposed to serve. Listen to this quote again. Too many illegal weapons are purchased in the South and make their way up to New York by way of the iron pipeline. Okay. So look at what he's focusing on. Huh? I mean, right? It's like people, suffering is being inflicted on people, right? By what? By these objects that are flowing in a pipeline that I made up in my mind. Not, in his mind, it's not the wicked, right, preying upon the decent. No, it's not. That's not the problem. The problem is that there's this piece of pipe that I've imagined, right, that sucks up objects from, somewhere in the South, right, and deposits them in New York. And that's the problem. And if you can get rid of that pipeline, then everyone will be better off. Now, bro, that's crazy. You know what I'm saying? That's madness. It's like, why have you given up on actually, serving the people and saying, listen, people are being harmed by other human beings. And we've got to do everything we can in New York, right, to make sure that if you harm somebody, right, then you will be neutralized as a threat. You will be taken off the board for a determinate length of time. Now, watch this. In New York State, what percentage of criminal cases actually make it to trial? The answer is less than 5. Less than 5. And this I have from a former prosecutor who happens to be my attorney. God bless him. Shout out to Vinu Varghese. Fewer than 5% of criminal cases make it to trial. What happens, you might ask, to the other 95%? Well, I mean, there's probably a breakdown within that 95%, but very, very, very many of them are pled down. What does it mean, pled down? What it means is this. If I go and commit some crime against you in New York, right, and then I'm a real crime now against you, not some stupid bullshit crime about having an object in your house. I mean, a real crime, right? A real violent crime. Then I have the option, right, when I'm called to account for this crime, to say, well, no, actually, I didn't do that. I did something else. In fact, it's usually the state who's supposed to hold me to account for that crime. It's the state of New York, right? If you commit a crime against someone in the state of New York, it's the state of New York that's supposed to take you to trial. It's supposed to, hey, you have outraged the people. So now we're going to have this case that's called the people versus whatever your name is, right? And we're going to, okay. It's the state that says, listen, we know you did this. We think you did this thing to this other person. But if you say you did this other thing that's not as bad, then you'll get a lighter punishment. That's what plea bargaining is. That's what it is.
Yeah. That's what they tried to get you to do, right?
Yes, exactly. And of course, my quote-unquote crime was not a real crime. It was one of the stupid paperwork crimes that Democrats love because it lets them, quote unquote so-called crimes like mine allow them to say, hey, we're really cracking down on crime, when of course, the people's peace was not harmed. No one's property was stolen. No one was threatened. No one was nothing happened to anyone. They're just mad that I had an object in my house. Okay. Now, but if I had gone out and attacked somebody, right, then of course I would have had the option to say, well, actually, I did something. The bad thing I did was not really the bad. It was some lesser bad thing I did. It was not as bad. And because the state would have said, hey, would you like to just admit that you did something not so bad, and then we'll give you less time? We'll let you out of prison sooner because you basically said you did some other crime, some lesser crime. That's good. And if you just think about it in those terms, you'll see that that's crazy. Now, whether it's a necessary crazy, that's a separate thing, right? I happen to think that you could have a lot fewer plea bargains, and it would be a good thing for the justice system. It would take some work. It would take some spending. It would take some a real public interest in revitalizing the criminal justice system, hiring more lawyers, hiring more judges, hiring more security guards for the courtrooms, and so on and so forth. You would have to spend some money. Right. But at the end of the day, you'd have a criminal justice system that at least meant what it said. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's like, well, we have a thing that meant what it said. Listen, if you harm someone in this way, we're going to go after you for harming someone in this way. But the fact is, the vast majority of the time, if you harm someone in this way, you get to plead it down to some lesser thing. But it's like, no, you did that thing to the person. That's what we really believe. Except that we don't want to turn that belief into an actual court case most of the time. Now, has Hakeem Jeffries ever mentioned that as part of the problem? I'll wait. Right? Has Hakeem Jeffries ever mentioned that as part? No. I talked some time ago about the breakdown of the family. Well, he talked about, one of the leading causes of death of children. You know what the leading cause of infant death is in America?
What's that?
It's abortion. It's abortion.
Oh, they don't consider that a death.
Right. In other words, right? Every zip code. What did he say? Let's see. And I can't remember what he said about. I can't pull up my notes. But basically, the idea is that everyone has a right to so and so and so. There's a safety. And I think it's very interesting that this church man. Because remember, he's a church man, right? There we go. Everyone in every zip code deserves equal access to opportunity. That's what he said. Everyone in every zip code deserves equal access to opportunity.
What does he mean by opportunity?
Maybe no one knows. Well, good question. But my question is this: who does everyone include? Because I'm going to bet you money, and listen, if I'm wrong about this, I'll take it back. But I'll bet you money that Hakeem Jeffries has never come out vocally against the pro-abortion agenda. Because remember, Democrats don't have a pro-choice agenda. What they have is a pro-abortion agenda. Right? Because you and I can point to instances where Democrats were not happy when anyone else stepped up and wanted to offer young pregnant women a different choice. Like, no, so then you're not pro-choice. You're not pro-choice, you're pro-abortion. And okay, if you want to be that, but admit to being that. Now, has Hakeem Jeffries ever talked about that? Does he admit that the unborn are part of everyone? That's interesting. Okay. And I mean, again, if you just scan the stuff he said and done, hypocrisy is everywhere. In other words, being a Democrat, he's got to get in line with the Democrat agenda. That is 100% pro-abortion. But at the same time, being a Democrat, he has to get with the Democrat agenda as far as open borders. So here you have a man who would sooner bar a human being's entry into the world than he would bar a foreign national's entry into this country. Isn't that something?
That is.
In other words, like when it comes to the southern border, come right in. You know, when it comes to the border between, you know, the unborn and the born, like no. It's like no, we're pro abortion. We love abortion. That's Democrats. And again, if Hakeem Jeffries has raised his voice against this, I'll take it back and apologize.
He's not as adamant about this as he is about gun control. That's for sure.
Well, I mean, again, you know, we have people hopefully listening to this show, and if people have clips of him, you know, coming out saying, "Hey, maybe we should look at other ways." Maybe look. If we can get him on record saying, look, maybe we should really talk about making abortion less common, like really think hard about abstinence, about adoption, about every other thing, because this is a horrible thing that we're doing.
Well, he can't do that. He'll lose support.
Oh, there we go. And by the way, I want to point out, I'm not saying what opinion, you know, other people should have. What I'm saying is, look, this guy is a member of the Cornerstone, lifelong member of the Cornerstone Baptist Church in New York. He's a Christian, I guess. Right?
He said he is.
You know, does the scripture say anything about the protection of children? Does the gospel say anything? Yes. Right? So there's some kind of thing going on with Hakeem Jeffries where, like, he, you know, he's not really a consistent human being, or at least his thinking and his reasoning and all that, they're not consistent. You see what I'm saying? So going back to your question, you know, the problem with Hakeem Jeffries is not that I don't agree with him. The problem with Hakeem Jeffries is that he doesn't agree with himself. And that's a terrible position for a human being to be in. And it's all the more terrible because he doesn't feel free to agree with himself because he's part of the Democratic Party establishment and he wants to go higher. And listen, by all means, I mean, that's the American dream. You know, you have a dream, you want to go, you want to serve the public, you want to, okay, whatever. But I'm saying, Jesus, don't you agree with yourself? What's the matter with you? And while we're at it, again, going back to my earlier question, why have you if you want to serve the people, if that's your ambition, if you want to serve the people in government, then why have you given up on the people? Why have you given up talking about what the law is for, which is to protect the decent from the wicked? And all you can talk about is magical pipelines you've made up in your mind and objects which appear on the streets of New York after having traveled some distance from some other state. Instead of, listen, people, right? People, we need to restore civic order and civic order and social capital. These things come from the family. And if we're serious about making life better for people in New York City, and wherever else, then we have to be serious about rebuilding the family, because that is where civic order comes from. That is where social capital comes from. That is where the authority of school teachers comes from. Speaking of another place where New York has been underperforming for years, You see what I'm saying? So, you know, people, please do not. Wait a minute. Someone's knocking on my glass. What's going on, bro? Razor? No, thank you. I'm good. Appreciate you. Yeah. So, this is a thing. This is the thing that we have to be honest about, and we have to, you know, be willing to ask these questions of politicians like Hakeem Jeffries? Why are they, why are they twisting themselves into these kinds of knots rather than grapple with these fundamental questions? And, I have a couple of ideas as to why they're doing that. And we can talk about that, at some point. But I wish they'd stop, and I wish he'd stop. And I wish he would at least, I can't say I wish he would stop being. He would. I wish he would at least tackle the issues honestly. But actually, I guess if he did, he wouldn't be a Democrat. So there we have it.
Hakeem Jeffries is quite the character when it comes to when it comes to abortion and when it comes to rights in general. He actually thinks abortion, Dexter, is a fundamental right, but he thinks gun control should be regulated heavily.
Wait, he thinks abortion is a what?
A fundamental right.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay, so there we go. so I don't have to take it back and apologize because, right, And again, look, if he thinks that, right? I mean, that's fine. But I'm saying, how does that square, right, with him getting weepy about the child victims of violence? Would he even be? I mean, look, I say routinely, I point out routinely that even something like surgery, you have appendicitis, you've got to get your appendix taken out. That is, you have to get surgery. That's an act of controlled violence. Snaffle surgery is an attack. Is an act of controlled violence performed hopefully by a professional in clean settings. Right? Okay. Is he even willing to admit? Is he even willing to call abortion an act of controlled violence? I don't think so. Right? I mean, because Democrat. Right? And I mean, and that's something that's self-evidently true, right? Look, a nose job, for God's sake, is an act of controlled violence. All surgery is. And by the way, speaking of surgery, I wonder what his position on child mutilation is. Right? I mean, let's put aside the unborn children thing because let's face it, a lot of people in our country really do fundamentally believe that an unborn infant is not really anything at all. And that there's no more moral weight to terminating a pregnancy than there is to cutting your fingernails. Okay, so we disagree on that. Fine. What do you think about child mutilation? Just curious, because I'm betting he has. I'm betting this supposed Christian who's been a lifelong church member. Yeah. I'm betting that he hasn't said anything against the cult of child mutilation that has sprung up inside the Democratic Party. Again, if I'm wrong, if you look up something up right now and I'm wrong, I'll take it back and apologize.
I'm looking it up right now. I have a clip of him talking about trans athletes in sports.
Yeah, but that's a different thing. That's a different thing. I mean, we can play that too, but yeah.
Yeah, so I'm looking it up right now as we speak.
Yeah. And meanwhile, as you look it up, I just go back to the kinds of things that we hear from the Hakeem Jeffries world. Most recently, actually, you sent me a tweet from Hakeem Jeffries concerning the redistricting, something to the effect that the Republicans have taken a blowtorch to. Yes, here it is. Hakeem Jeffries recently tweeted that, quote, MAGA Republicans are taking a blowtorch to Black representation in the American South. Donald Trump and Supreme Court extremists are responsible for this carnage. We will crush them at the ballot box in November. Ooh, getting a little spicy there. All right. So
Get a little fired up.
you know, yeah, get a little fired up. Okay, no, that's all right. You know, that's good. You know, it's good to get nothing like strong rhetoric to summon up the blood. Okay, fine. Look, you know, for God's sake, Leonard Jeffries' uncle, his brother is a Black history professor, right? You would think that he had some notion of what the Second Amendment means to Black representation, right? And when I say representation, I don't just mean political representation. You see, political power comes from economic power, right? And economic power comes from a handful of things. But one of the things you have to have in order to really have economic power is the power to defend what you have made, right? So if you have land, for example, you don't have economic power because if you have land, well, that means you have direct access to the means of production. Now, if you farm this land and you pull a crop out of the earth, and then you can sell that crop, whatever, and you can kind of turn your assets into prosperity. Well, then you've built some economic power. And if you and the other small farmers in whatever area can do that for long enough and successfully enough, then you now have some political power. You have some influence based on the fact that you're property holders and based on the fact that you're part of an economically productive class. But here's the catch. Here is the catch. If you are a Black American, let's say a Black farmer, in the post-Civil War South, then one of the things you may, in fact, be called upon to do, yes, the post-Civil War, I didn't say civil rights, Civil War, the post-Civil War South, Reconstruction era and so on, Jim Crow era and so on. One of the things you may be called upon to do is to defend your property and your family and your homestead and your life, and to defend those things by force of arms. Huh? From who? From Democrats, because we're talking about the Jim Crow era here. Yeah?
You have 1 minute left.
And again, it is shocking to me that Hakeem Jeffries doesn't know this, or that if he does know it, he refuses to say it. That's crazy, bro. Anyway, I just heard Mini Mates. I'm going to drop and we're going to pick it up when I come back.
All right, man. See you on the other side. All right, man. See you on the other side, brother.
All right.
All right. You're
The caller
listening
has
to
hung
The
up.
Hidden Path. I'm going to play a clip for Hakeem Jeffries talking about Republicans fucking around and finding out.
Our message to Florida Republicans is F around and find out. If
Florida
they go down the
Republicans.
road of a DeSantis dummy mander, the
You
Florida
heard this
Republicans are going
earlier.
to find themselves in the same situation as Texas Republicans, who are on the run right now. And under no circumstances are Texas Republicans picking up 5 seats. They'll be fortunate if they get 2 or 3. While in California, we are going to get all 5. The Republicans are dummy mandering their way into the minority before a single vote is cast, because they started this war and we're going to finish it.
So that was Hakeem Jeffries talking about Florida Republicans. I'm going to play you some more clips. Hold on. Live broadcasting here, y'all.
Peter, Trump is trying to make this about transgender surgeries for youth, for adults. Is that something the Democrats?
Hold on one
This
second,
is a free
everybody.
call from-
I'm going to get Dexter back on the line. I'm going to play that clip a little later.
An incarcerated individual
And
at
see what
New
you
York
guys,
State Department of Corrections and
see what
Community
Dexter thinks about it.
Supervision.
This call is subject to recording and monitoring.
Once again, you're
An
listening to The
incarcerated
Hidden
individual's
Path
use of institutional
with Dexter
telephones
Taylor, aka Carbon Mike. we got more in store for you. We're going up to 10 o'clock. So this is the last hour of the show. Hopefully you guys are enjoying everything and having fun. If you are, please give the show a like and a share. It helps us out, especially since my account has been compromised and I don't have the reach that I used to have. So I thank you and keep on listening. All right, Desert's back with us, everybody.
Yes, sir.
We are
Yes, sir.
talking Hakeem Jeffries, everybody's favorite dollar store Obama. Dexter, you was going off on a tangent there for a little bit, so I'm gonna let you continue that, sir.
Well, yeah, thank you. Because this, I think it's really interesting that Hakeem Jeffries again seems not to agree with himself. Right? I'm a conservative. You're a conservative, so we take it for granted that he doesn't agree with us, which is fine. But again, if we just look at the man, right, and look at his history, and look at what he says and does, and then look at what he doesn't say and doesn't do. All of it together, paints a picture of a man who does not even agree with himself. Right? He supposedly feels a way about redistricting, right? Even though Democrats and Republicans have been redistricting for years. Gerrymandering was the term came about because of something a Democrat did. We talked about that in the previous show, but let's put it to one side. Okay, both parties have done this thing fine. Okay, so the Republicans are in power. Trump is a savvy political operator. He understands the nature and the use of power. He decides to make this move. How one feels about that move is a separate matter. In other words, if you're hearing the sound of my voice, I'm not saying that you should believe that redistricting on the Trump model is necessarily a good thing. I'm not saying that. What I'm pointing out is that when Hakeem Jeffries gets weepy about it on Twitter, right, and he talks about how, quote, MAGA Republicans are taking a blowtorch to black representation in the American South, right? That is hard to square. That is hard to square with a man who fundamentally rejects the idea of armed self-defense for everybody, right? But especially for Black Americans. He does not like the idea of arms. Well, how is it possible that you care about Black representation in the South and you are pro-gun control? That does not make any sense. Because the whole point of what was happening in the American South, when we literally had a terrorist organization running the show down there, making policy, and all the rest of it. The whole point of it was that Black people who were living in that situation, very many times had to resort to force of arms in order to preserve their right simply to vote. What Hakeem Jeffries is trying to defend, by contrast, just sidebar, right? He's trying to defend this notion, a mistaken notion, in my opinion, that the Voting Rights Act says that if a given part of the countryside is mostly Black, then they have to be guaranteed that they will always be able to elect a Democrat. And I'm sorry, the Voting Rights Act cannot possibly mean that. It is not possible that that's what the legislation means. That you, because of the color of your skin, have a guaranteed right to always elect a Democrat. No! That's really a faulty interpretation of what the thing actually says. Now, again, that doesn't mean that every redistricting plan is fair. It doesn't mean that everyone is going to make out well with redistricting. This is politics. This is not good versus evil. This is who gets what. And in the question of who gets what, it's a zero-sum game, and voting elections are a zero-sum game. Then yes, some people may not benefit from that's true. But he wants you to think that the Voting Rights Act was written to guarantee Democrat politicians a seat in a particular district merely because the people in that district were black. That cannot possibly be what it meant. And again, terminating that sidebar, going back to my original point, right? He wants to, you can tell by his tweets, you can tell by the things that he wants to conjure up this image of a Jim Crow era South, right? He wants people to stop thinking and get into feelings when they, conjure up these images of segregation and lynching and so on. But the fact is, the reason black folks were able to stand up against that at all was because they picked up arms to defend themselves. Huh? Black folks in the American South picked up arms to defend themselves, to defend their lives, to defend their businesses, their property, their homes. And listen, some of them lost their lives. Yes. Well, that's what war is.
Well, the Democrats will have you believe the current Democrat. I was going to say the current Democrats will have you believe that the reason why we was able to get the right to vote was because Martin Luther King marched and had a nonviolent approach, and that guns was never a part of the process. What do you say to that?
Yeah, isn't that something? Well, I'd say that the only reason, aside from the fact, reasonable people can agree on whether that was the sole reason we made political progress. But okay, let's go with that for the sake of the argument. Well, the fact is that when Martin Luther King went on tour, right, when he and his entourage had to drive around the American South, first of all, they traveled armed. That's the first thing.
Deacons of Defense. Look them up.
And they there was that too. But even separate from the Deacons for Defense, which I'll get to in a second, they started in Louisiana, right? But all across the American South, there was a network of black safe houses that people like King could depend on, and each of those safe houses was an arsenal of weapons, 100%. I think there's a story in this book, this great book. By the way, shout out to my friend Jeff Charles and his lovely wife, Gotti. Jeff sent me this book called Negroes Under Gun by Nicholas Johnson. Great book. It talks about the black history of arms, the black history of self-defense, something that Democrats like Hakeem Jeffries will never talk about. Because the way they think about us as a people, bro, the way they think about it as people is it's like a suffering mass. You see what I'm saying? They think of the black American as an object of pity, and that's all. To people like Hakeem Jeffries, we are only what has been done to us. That's it. To people like Hakeem Jeffries, the history of America is us getting our asses kicked, and then good liberals marching with us and singing some songs, and everything gets better because Lyndon Johnson signed something. No, it wasn't like that. I'll give you an example. Those of us who are kind of clued in know about Black Wall Street. That's what it was called. It was a section of downtown Tulsa, Oklahoma, in the early 1900s. It was a center of black enterprise, black banks, dry goods stores, haberdashers. I mean, you name it, right? It was a thriving center of industry. We had a lot. It wasn't just one. We had a lot of Black Wall Streets in America back in the early 1900s. Why? Because the government wasn't, quote unquote, helping us. You see what I'm saying? Okay, so Tulsa, Oklahoma, 1921, right? There was a riot. There was a race riot, instigated by, what looked like white Democrats who were afraid that black folks had guns. Okay, and the Democrats burned down Black Wall Street. Now, by the way, when I say this, I'm not saying this to say, that's why you should vote Republican. I don't tell people how they should vote. What I'm pointing out is that is what happened, right? They lost their minds and they burned down Black Wall Street. Now, here's what I want to talk about. Now, people like Hakeem Jeffries, when they bother to talk about Tulsa, and when they bother to talk about the Tulsa race riot and the burning down of Black Wall Street, they talk about this in this kind of weepy way. But here's something right from this book, right from Negroes in the Gun. It's from a historian, a Black historian named John Hope Franklin. Okay, and Franklin lived in Tulsa for much of his life. He had actually moved to Tulsa at age 10. He studied what happens at in this Tulsa race riot. He studied this field of burning down of Wall Street, but he went further. He looked at what happened after the fires went out and after Black folks started to rebuild Black Wall Street. That is after Black people in Tulsa took up arms, right? And many of them gave their lives in defense of what they had built. Here's what he says. He's talking about after the burning down of Black Wall Street, after the Tulsa race riot of 21. He said, the self-confidence of Tulsa's Negroes soared. Their businesses prospered. Their institutions flourished. And they simply had no fear of whites. After 1921, an altercation in Tulsa between a white person and a Black person was not a racial incident, even if there was a loss of life. It was just an incident. Such an attitude had a great deal to do with eradicating the fear that a Negro boy growing up in Tulsa might have felt in the years following the riot. Now, isn't that extraordinary? Isn't that extraordinary? In other words, yes, what I said about the law and the law's purpose to protect the decent from the wicked, the law doesn't always work. The law doesn't always have that effect. We know this. But sometimes what can happen, right, is if the depraved of heart, right, want to jump out on decent people, and decent people pick up arms and say, listen, you're going to have to work for this here. And I am ready to, yes, I'll die, but I can always take one of you with me. Then it's just possible that in the aftermath, people say, wait a minute, now we're dealing with actual human beings here. We're not dealing with objects of pity. We're not dealing with cattle that we can just cull at will. These are people. And we have to respect them, even if we don't love them, even if we don't like them, even if we don't favor the smell of their cooking, like we have to actually figure out how to live with them because these people are not a joke. That's the lesson of Tulsa, Oklahoma. That's the lesson of Black Wall Street. Armed self-defense. Now, will you ever hear Hakeem Jeffries talk about this? No. And that's despite the fact that he has a brother who is a professor of Black history.
Wow.
Right.
Dexter, let me ask you a question. Because we're talking about
Yes, sir.
Black Wall Street in Tulsa. Now, the AR-15 didn't exist then. Or, modern semi-automatic weapons didn't exist then.
Well, but wait a minute. Well, actually, wait a minute. I don't want to interrupt your train of thought, but I want to point out to you that in many of, and this is what I learned from this same book, Negroes in the Gun by Nicholas Johnson. There was a difference between there were a wide variety of rifles and shotguns, available for people to buy now. Repeating rifles were a thing back then.
I agree with that. I'm saying modern, like, your AR-15, your AK-47, things like that. I know, like, things like the Tommy gun.
I know, but I'm going with you on this. I'm saying you're onto something. What I want to point out to you is that, if the Democrats Democrats back then do want any black people have guns, but put that aside. If the politicians, the gun grabbers we have now, right, have been around then, okay, they would have passed all kinds of laws that said black folks can't have repeating rifles. Because in cases where black Americans were under threat, okay, by the Ku Klux Klan, by the Night Riders, in the cases where they were outgunned, many times it was not just because they were outnumbered. It was because the Klan members and so on who were gunning for black folks had higher quality rifles, specifically rifles that were capable of a higher rate of fire, which is why I so rudely interrupted you, because I'm like, I see where you're going with this, and it matters so much. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I was going to ask you, do you think the people in Tulsa would have benefited from semi-automatic rifles, or do you think they would have had AR-15s, AK-47s back in that day, back in 1921?
100,000% they would have.
So I'm going to play you a clip. From Hakeem Jeffries talking about semi-automatic rifles.
House Democrats believe that weapons of war, which are not used to hunt deer, but are used to hunt human beings and slaughter innocent children, do not belong in our communities across this country. Republicans have a different view. Then air that out on the House floor in front of the American people. We're confident in our position. Stop hiding your position. House Democrats.
So I think it's funny that he talks about these weapons being weapons of war, while at the same time being protected by House Police. I'm forgetting the name. What's the name of the police department? But
Capitol
Police. Thank you, Capitol Police. Being protected by Capitol Police, who uses these same weapons that he is calling weapons of war and that don't belong on our city streets. It's so ironic.
Well, it is, but I mean, that's, we've come to kind of accept that with the King James. That's something else, right? It's like, again, this church man, right, came up in a Baptist church, no less, right? I mean, well, where do I begin? Look, first of all, every weapon is a weapon of war.
Correct.
Everything that human beings can pick up, swing, throw, what have you, set on fire is a weapon of war. And it has been forever. For as long as there has been war. And if Hakeem Jeffries had soaked up any of the scripture that they were talking about, any of the gospels they were talking about, back in Cornerstone Baptist Church, he would have remembered that Christ himself told us to buy swords. He would have remembered that a little bitty Israelite named David, who came from the agricultural sector, beat a giant Philistine warrior named Goliath with a weapon of war known as a slingshot. Does anyone want to embarrass themselves by saying that slingshots have never been weapons of war? Please step up, because I'd love to, take part in that spectacle. I mean, people who know their history know that slingshots are absolutely weapons of war. You don't believe me? Look it up. Look up Alexander the Great and Maniple warfare. MANIPLE warfare. Stop it now. Behave yourself. Pointed six have been weapons of war. Don't get me started. What are you talking about? Huh? Again, speaking of people jumping out against Philistines, what was that guy from Samson? That's right, Samson. Right. Samson laid out a bunch of Philistines with what? With what weapon of war? With the jawbone of a donkey. So please, less of all this pious bullshit about how a semi-automatic rifle, that you think looks scary. Sissy. is a weapon of war. Stop it. Behave yourself. Because that's the only, look, bro, it's like you and I can think of you personally probably have half a dozen hunting rifles with wooden stocks and forends in the traditional style that are actually semi-automatic. Same rate of fire as an AR-15, that's semi-automatic, that's not full auto, which, as you and I know, you can't legally buy a full auto AR-15 unless you have a particular kind of FFL called an SOT, a Specialized Occupational or something. It's a SOT.
Yeah.
But aside from that, you're limited to fully semi-auto AR-15s, AK-47s. That is to say, one depression of the trigger, one round goes out the muzzle. Okay. So I mean, there's all kinds of rifles that are semi-automatic, but he is scared by these kinds of rifles because I don't know, they're black and they have pistol grips and I don't know. But again, the man doesn't make sense. He does not make sense because, again, his philosophy is wrong. He's starting from this. He hasn't thought about what a weapon of war is. He hasn't thought about what war is. He hasn't thought about history.
He's not saying
and think about it. If he hasn't thought about the history of black people in America, which he hasn't because he's pro-gun control, if he has not thought about black history, he has not thought about the history of black defense of our rights and our properties in our lives. If he hasn't thought about that, and we know he hasn't because we can see from what he said, if he hasn't, what are the chances that he's thought about things like the history of warfare, the history of conflict, the history of violence, what we are as a species, as a thing in the world, as children of God? He hasn't thought of any of this stuff. And I mean, what's his excuse? This is not some grad student. The man has been around. Like I said, he's a lifelong churchman. He spent 10 years in the private sector. He spent more than that in government. Why was he there? What does he think his purpose is? What does he think the law is? What does he think the law is for? What does he think the state is? What does he think the citizen is? What does he think the proper relationship between those two is? And the most charitable thing I could say about Hakeem Jeffries is not even that he's wrong about those things, but that he just it hasn't occurred to him. Because all he's troubled about is the political fortunes of the Democratic Party. And listen, if that's his thing, seriously, Carl, like if that's his thing, if this is, I don't care about all this history shit, all this, black people, the Deacons of Defense, the original Black Panther Party, which is the Lowndes County Freedom Organization. More on them in a second. I don't care about all that shit. I'm with the Democrats. If that's his thing, well then okay, right? But then why get weepy about this other stuff? Just be honest. In other words, you just consider the Democrats are gonna take a hit. That's all, right? And look, there's nothing wrong with that. You know what I'm saying? But just admit the thing. Like you don't care about the actual people that hired you to do the job. You care about the party. Well, fair enough. But spare us all the dumb, hideous noises you're making. You know what I'm saying? It grates on the ear. You know what I'm saying? It's just like, I mean, that's a thing. And, I have to mention the whole Black Panther Party because when, again, the thing about black representation, right? And voting rights. Okay, so everyone thinks about Huey Newton and Bobby Seale and those guys being the Black Panther Party, but actually there was an older Black Panther Party that came out of, I believe, Georgia. It was Lowndes County, Georgia, Lownddes. People can look this up. The Lowndes County Freedom Organization, and its icon, its emblem, was a Black Panther. And this was an armed organization, a black organization, whose whole purpose was to defend Black people in Lowndes County who wanted to exercise their rights by voting. So that's what they did. They got themselves together, they armed themselves, and they organized, and they would escort people to the polls and made sure that at that time the Democrats in the area didn't jump out with violence against Black people who were merely trying to vote. Now, that's defending Black representation in the South. Don't tell me that now it's this existential crisis because in some number of districts in the South or elsewhere, it may come to pass that a Democrat might not be guaranteed a seat. I don't want to hear it. I'm not interested. Just as I wouldn't be interested if I heard that there was some thing that a Republican somewhere is not guaranteed a seat, but that's his business. I don't deserve that seat. No politician deserves anything. If all politicians got what they deserve, the devil would be gentrified right out of hell. So no one deserves anything. But the fact is, we still, Black folks, Black Americans, still have the right to participate in the political process. But guess what? To really get big things done, we were always going to have to make political coalitions anyway. Because we are outnumbered. That's how it is. We're 15% of the population, for God's sake. And you see, liberals and progressives have been saying this shit about for years. You've heard them say it, Carl, about, in so and so many years, white people are not going to be the majority anymore. And people of color will be, as if that makes a goddamn difference. Look, if I want to build a political coalition with some guy who came here from India, or maybe second or third generation from India, right? I can't go up to him and say, well, you and I both have some, above baseline amount of melanin in our skins, and therefore let's caucus and let's vote together on this issue. Nonsense. I have to appeal to him the old-fashioned way. Who are you? What's your name? My name is this. What are your interests? Here are my interests. Does it make sense for us to work together on the basis of X, Y, Z, A, B, C? And that goes for every other quote-unquote person of color here on the American scene. What did we think? What did they want us to think? That just because you had a certain number of quote-unquote us living in a certain place, you had guaranteed political outcomes? And I mean, and that's leaving aside the question of how those people who've been serving those districts have been underserving those districts for years. You and I talked on the show, Carl. We talked about Sheila McCormick. Planting a CD down there in Florida. What was she doing?
Stealing money from FEMA.
She was stealing disaster recovery money from poor people. Right? So what, Hakeem Jeffries has a problem with that? We're supposed to be guaranteed. We're supposed to twist our interpretation of the law to guarantee that Sheila goddamn McCormick always has a seat. Fuck that. We're not doing it. We're not interested. We're going to go on with that. Sheila McCormick. Lost your mind. Look at Baltimore. Huh? Baltimore been run by Black folks for decades. Been messed up for decades. And every time people start to get hit to the scans, you've got to make sure Baltimore is a chocolate city. Why? For what? What's that getting you? Where are the outcomes? Where are the results?
You have 1 minute left.
Where's the infrastructure? Where's the economics? Where's the policy? Oh. See, that's what that's like. Again, I could disagree. It's fine, but I get this feeling when I hear people like Hakeem Jeffries talk. It's not like I disagree with you. It's like, bro, don't bullshit me. Stop that shit. Anyway, Mitt May just chimed in. On top, it's on a turnaround.
All right, everybody, you're listening to the Hit and Pass.
The caller has hung up.
Carbon Mike in the last segment got really spicy. I mean, this is a very passionate topic. We're talking about Hakeem Jeffries and all of his political nonsense, I would describe it as. We're talking about his stance on gun control, his stance on abortion, his stance on the economy, his stance on pretty much everything. And Carbon Mike is giving his point of view on it. Again, we do this every Monday at 7 p.m. Tonight, we're bringing you a special episode because last Monday, I had a seizure. Well, not Monday, it was Sunday, but I had to miss the show Monday. We always enjoy being with you guys, so we decided to do the show, not make you wait until Monday, but do the show today. I'm feeling better. I'm feeling strong. I'm feeling in my right mind. So I'm talking with you guys today. So if you're enjoying the show, please give it a share. We do appreciate it. It's about 340 people listening to us right now, and we do appreciate that. Keep sharing the stream. Let YouTube or X know that you like it by hitting the like button. If you're listening to us on X, please retweet the stream so other people can enjoy the show as well who haven't found us yet. If you're wondering about my Twitter account, why it's 1,700 followers and not the usual 46,000, it's because my account was hacked by a Nigerian scammer. Yes, a Nigerian scammer decided to hack my account, and now I can't get in. It's locked, unfortunately. I did reach out to Twitter support, but they're useless. But we'll see what happens. But for further notice, I am locked out of that account, so please block it. Yes, block it. And feel free to follow me over at Your Smartass Carl. That's at Your Smartass Carl. At URA Smartass Carl. All one word. Hopefully I can get the account back, but I wouldn't hold my breath. And again, we are talking Mr. Hakeem Jeffries, the man who really loves gun control, by the way. He is a staunch supporter of an assault weapons ban that will do absolutely nothing to stop mass shootings. Why? Because all of the current laws that allow people to purchase a firearm would not have stopped a single mass shooter since 1999. Hell, even before that. But let's just go back to 1999 with the Columbine shooters. It wouldn't have stopped them. Every one of them passed a background check or stole the gun from a legal gun owner. So there's that.
Start the conversation now.
I want to welcome back Carbon Mike, the host of this great program that you're listening to now. We're still talking about Mr. Hakeem Jeffries, aka Dollar Store Obama. The reason why we call him Dollar Store Obama is because of our good friend Crystal, who coined that phrase to describe Hakeem Jeffries. Because let's be real, he kind of reminds us of a young Obama when Obama first ran for president. But we're talking about his inconsistencies and the fact that the man doesn't even understand himself. So, Carbon Mike, take it away.
Yes, sir. Hakeem Jeffries, I'm a staunch conservative. You're a staunch conservative. Friends of ours like Crystal, Queen B, Corey, Peter Ray from Chicago, right? That's all we all. We're all conservatives, but we're all happy to argue with someone who doesn't agree with us. That's the point of the exercise. This is politics. But yes, you're quite right. The problem with arguing with someone like Hakeem Jeffries is that he does not agree with himself. Now, I don't know if you found anything. I know earlier I mentioned that he got very weepy about the children, but I don't think I would bet money that he didn't say. He's never said anything against child mutilation, which Democrats today seem to be all in on. Did you find him coming out against child mutilation at all?
I have scoured the internet, even asked Gemini to help, and I cannot find a single clip of him coming out against child mutilation.
Well, that's a thing. You know what I'm saying? Well, I thought you cared about the children. Hakeem Jeffries. You see what I'm saying? So this because again, look, I mean. Every unwarranted act of violence is unconscionable. But I mean, few things turn the stomach, like the idea of mutilating children. And a couple of shows ago, I think you and I, in our kind of current events segment, we talked about a couple of people who attempted to abduct a child away from his biological mother down to Cuba, where they apparently intended to have him mutilated. He was 10 years old. 10 years old. Again, does Hakeem Jeffries have anything to say about that? I doubt it. And you tried to find it. Again, maybe someone in the audience can find it. Please, by all means, if the facts tell me to be wrong, I will take it back and apologize. But moving on to the other problems with Hakeem Jeffries, you and I are obviously strong Second Amendment advocates. You mentioned that Hakeem Jeffries had some Democrat platitude to say about AR-15s being weapons of war. Of course, as I pointed out, like every weapon, every conceivable weapon is or has been a weapon of war since the invention of war, right? So I just, again, the man does not think deeply, and that wouldn't be so bad by himself. But he wants to make public policy, right? He wants to make public policy for us. And so it's legitimate to ask, well, what is this man about? And, so far, the only answer that I can come up with is not very much. He thinks that redistricting, especially in the shadow of this latest Supreme Court decision, means that there's no chance for Black people in America, and especially in the American South, to get any kind of fair representation. And, that, again, if you just start to look into the history of the American South and look into the history of Black politics in the American South, right, the Black political efforts in the American South, well, yes, Black folks had to fight and in some cases lose their lives in defense of their right to participate. But Black folks in the American South or anywhere else in America, I would argue, right, never had, as a matter of history, never had some notion that they had an ironclad right that someone of a given political party must always serve in this seat, in this place. That's just nonsense. I mean, it's an insult to our history as Black people to suggest otherwise. No. And you can see, and if you just bother to go back and look at that history, you see, here's the thing, Carl. Democrats like Hakeem Jeffries want you to focus on one thing and one thing only. And I've talked about that kind of phenomenon before. You've probably been in spaces with me or listened to live streams or where I talked about this notion of the pornographic view of history versus the holographic view of history. And what I mean by that is so the pornographic view of something is where you zero in on one part of the whole thing. You zero in on a part and you magnify it. And then you treat that as if it's the whole thing. That's pornographic, right? You disembody this part and you blow it up to wall size, and that's all you can see and you're obsessed. That's as opposed to the holographic view of history, which sees the parts as part of the whole, which is capable of seeing the whole in each part, right? And so on and so forth, right? And I would argue that people like Hakeem Jeffries specialize in this pornographic view of history. Why? Because if they can get you to adjust your kind of your reading frame so that you're thinking about history pornographically, so that you're thinking about the Black experience not as a profoundly human experience, but merely as just an ongoing litany of suffering, right? Then you're going to miss stuff that you really, really need to not miss, right? You know, you're gonna miss the fact that Black folks have participated in politics, that Black folks have oftentimes made a pragmatic choice to elect this or that white guy, you know, because they thought that their interests lay this way or that way. It wasn't always about crime and welfare. Sometimes it was about, hey, well, who's going to do this for business? Who's going to do this for industry? Who's going to make it easier for us to, you know, turn our assets and our skill sets into prosperity? The very things that Democrats seem hell-bent on you not doing. Right. And there's many examples of this. I think that there's a book called A Black Odyssey. Can't remember the author, but someone should go look it up. A Black Odyssey. It's about post-Civil War, Reconstruction era politics. The excerpts I've read were about a Black Republican in Kansas, and his name was John Lewis Waller, right? He's Republican. He had problems with the Republican Party, right? The Republican Party was trying to figure out whether it really wanted Black people around. Let's not whitewash history and pretend like Republicans were always on the side of the Keynesians. They were not. But the point is that when talking about Kansas post-Civil War and talking about people like John Lewis Waller, the man who wrote this book, A Black Odyssey, actually paints this whole picture of political coalitions and contested elections and patronage and appointments and kind of backstage maneuvering and all this complex human stuff that happens in politics. In other words, it is a profoundly human story, right? And Hakeem Jeffries was to simplify all that down to, Black people, you need us Democrats to save you from them because racism. I'm sorry, that's not good enough. It's not complicated enough. It's not real enough. It's not true enough. It's not relevant enough. Do better. But I have to say, I don't think Hakeem. Well, you know something? I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt, and I'll say that he may actually be capable of doing better than that. Hakeem Jeffries may be capable of doing better than that, but he doesn't want to, and that's his problem. But if he becomes the Speaker of the House, then it'll be our problem. So, it is what it is. But yeah, that's, I think tonight's as you know, Carl, because we've gone over the current arc of shows, this and the next two, and we've got some other things to develop about Hakeem Jeffries. But I think tonight's, I want to go too far beyond tonight's focus, which is just a broad outline of who the man is, the things he said, where he's coming from in terms of his personal history, and how those things do or do not square with each other. And again, to me, the way I read it, it's like they don't square with each other. And that's why I say Hakeem Jeffries does not understand himself. That's what I meant to point out, because you actually mentioned the Deacons for Defense and Justice. This was a Black organization that came out of Louisiana. I forget what year. I should look at it in this book here, because they talk about the Deacons. But, Black churchmen, right? Just as Hakeem Jeffries is supposedly a Black churchman, right? And these Black churchmen in Louisiana understood that what was needed was people who were willing to stand up and provide armed defense to Black Americans in the South. And when SNCC was touring the American South, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and other organizations in that vein, right, came down and were touring the American South. And let's give them credit; they did put themselves at considerable risk. Often the Deacons for Defense and Justice would show up to protect them, because they needed in some parts of the American South, and no matter what color they were, actually, these people didn't stand a chance if the Night Riders came after them and didn't have weapons, right? So, the Deacons for Defense and Justice, and of course, what is interesting about that organization, beyond the obvious, right, is that many of these guys who served, many of the Black men who served in these ad hoc organizations, right, they stepped up specifically because they had military experience. Right. A lot of, one thing that people don't like to talk about is the fact that, Black men who served in World War I, let's take that first, served in World War I, came back from the military service with kind of a new sense of self, and a new sense of meaning, and a new sense of capability. And wait a second, I have skill sets. Oh, wait a minute, I have skill sets and a loaded weapon. Yeah, so we're not doing any crossboarding tonight. That's not, no. You know what I'm saying? It's like, no, we're not doing that. And oh yeah, there's an election coming up, and the local Democrat knuckleheads, who want to come out and break Black heads. If we have the temerity to actually vote, they respect one thing. Oh, that's the thing I have: skill sets, a loaded weapon, and the willingness to use both together. And the reason I point this out is because these guys actually took up arms that were at the time actual weapons of war. Some of the weapons that were used to defend Black Americans, right, were actually weapons that had seen service overseas in war. You see what I'm saying? You see why I feel a kind of way about Hakeem Jeffries in the shit he says? If you, I'm sorry, bro, come on. Like, if you take a certain pride in being of our tribe, of the Black American tribe, then you've got to feel a way when someone like Jeffries just kind of passes over that like it never meant anything. That's why I figured it out. That's why I'm so worked up tonight. That's why. It's really not because of my personal circumstances or my case or nothing like that, bro. It's because he wants to treat that like it never meant anything to us. Huh? And it's like, I can't square that. There's no way I can square that. It's just not happening. Now, hold on a second. Let me look at this page right here. Deacons for Defense and Justice. Let's see, 270 and 284. What are we looking at? Yeah. So, the Deacons for Defense and Justice. So Jonesboro. Yeah, that's right. So the Deacons for Defense and Justice started in Jonesboro, Louisiana, in 1964, and from there they kind of branched out across the South, right? At some point, the Jonesboro Police Department, believe it or not, right, tried to hijack Black activists by deputizing them, and then they said, okay, they assigned them to go and arrest these civil rights protesters at the Jonesboro, Louisiana Police Department, and at some point, they came face to face with a bunch of Democrats, who were taunting workers from the Congress of Racial Equality at this place called the Jonesboro Freedom House. And the thing went sideways, and next thing you know, there were dozens of men with guns there, and it was like, we were off to the races, right? So again, Deacons for Defense and Justice. They ended up right at odds with people like SNCC and with people like CORE, Congress of Racial Equality. The book mentions a field worker named Charles Fenton. He was from CORE, and he was a pacifist. God bless his heart, and he had these nonviolent principles. And a lot of these guys who went down south to organize voters had these non-violent principles. There were a lot of, I'm sorry to say it, but there were, more vegetarians and water drinkers than you or I might be comfortable with. And what they found was that, no. If you want to do this here, the fact is that we've got to protect the people, protect you and the people who live here, because you flew in from out of town, drove in, whatever, and at some point you're going to leave. But we have to live here, And again, like I said, the Deacons for Defense and other organizations like them literally resorted to weapons of war to defend the decent from the wicked. Right. And, to me, bro, this is as kind of heroic as it gets, and again, people like Hakeem Jeffries want to kind of ignore all that and talk about suffering and talk about pity and treat it as if all we're good to do is reach our hands out to receive the crumbs that political hacks like Hakeem Jeffries choose to brush off the table when they're done. And I say that advisedly because, let's face it, a lot of federal money has come down to the cities, bro. We'll get into this in a subsequent show, but a lot of federal money over the years has come down to places like New York State and New York City. Where's the money at? How was it spent? We've been talking about this and having meetings for decades. And yet somehow here we are, right, with a bunch of politicians, many of whom having worth in the millions, even though they signed up for a job that pays low six figures. And in the face of that, I'm supposed to do what now? what exactly? Weep on cue when Hakeem Jeffries belatedly decides to suggest that the Second Amendment matters, but only to white guys in Minneapolis who run out of white privilege and get themselves shot. I mean, I'm not gonna. I don't want to go off on another rant because we don't want to go too late tonight. But yeah, this is why I feel a kind of way about Hakeem Jeffries. The American black man is not an object of pity. He is simply not. Right? He is a profoundly human actor, one of many, in this arena, in this democratic experiment. Small d, well, Republican experiment, really, but you know what I mean, right? In this American experiment, and his story is just as complex as anybody else's, and it's got all the elements of a good story. It's got heroism, it's got baseness, it's got generosity, it's got selfishness, it's got it's got chivalry, and it's got cruelty. It's got everything in it. We contain multitudes. And Hakeem Jeffries is not interested. And that's why he can't be trusted. And that's why no one who thinks like he does can be trusted with power. Doesn't matter what party they're from. Doesn't matter. Anyone who wants to simplify matters beyond what the fact of the matter will bear can't be trusted. Anyone who doesn't have a rock solid ideology of what a human being is and what a human being is worth, and what the proper relationship between the citizen and the state is. Anyone who hasn't worked all that shit out can't be trusted. Anyone whose party affiliation is more important than right and wrong can't be trusted. And of course, anyone who wants to disarm you, Carl, who wants to disarm me, anyone who says, listen, there's murderous white supremacists everywhere, and they want to take you right back to the Jim Crow era. And then in the same sentence says, that's why you need to give up your guns. Can't be trusted. Because at the end of the day, I mean, listen, I told you, I mean, some of our listeners out there are believing Christians like me. And if you read your scriptures, Christ told us to buy swords.
Yeah.
And Christ also said, listen, he said this here. He said, render unto Caesar's what is Caesar's, and render unto God what is God. Now, what the Second Amendment reminds us of is that if Caesar wants to take your guns, he's got to come and take them. And that's it.
I mean, sometimes you can't just help but sit here and listen to what you have to say, Dexter, on these types of topics. And I'm hoping that everybody who's listening right now, we have about close to 400 people listening, despite, my account not being active, my Twitter account not being active. We still have a loyal fan base who followed us here. So I appreciate you guys for coming in and listening to us break down Hakeem Jeffries.
Yeah.
But we're not done with old Hakeem. We're still going to be breaking them down on corresponding shows. But one thing I want to leave our listeners with and understanding something about Hakeem, but just not him, the Democrat Party as a whole, they're inconsistent. Well, we talked a lot about gun rights during this show. And the platform, what they're doing is manipulating you. The Democrat platform is manipulating you. They want you to believe that, and Desi, you touched on this. They want you to believe that the racist KKK is alive and well, and they're coming to get you. But they want you to turn over your guns. They want you to believe that Donald Trump and his administration is a dictatorship, but they want you to turn over your guns to them. Make that make sense to the most logical person on the planet, and you can't. It's impossible. Because a logical person will look at it as what it truly is. It's manipulation. They're trying to disarm you. They're using the media. They're using shame. They're using pop culture. They're using every avenue that they can to manipulate you so that future generation, not just this one, but future generation will just willingly turn over their gun rights. I mean, they don't want to get into a costly, bloody, long civil war. They've seen how that worked out the last time. That's the last thing that they want. They don't want damage to their financial systems, their infrastructure, their land, or anything like that. What they want you is to be lulled to sleep and made to give up your right through social pressure. And I think that's what Hakeem Jeffries and the Democrat Party ultimate goal is.
I think that's right. And by the way, I'll say this too. Here's the good news, right? Hakeem Jeffries and the Democrats, as disrespectful as I think their position is toward, toward Americans, but especially toward Black Americans in our history. As disrespectful as I think their position is, as dismissive as their position is, the good news is that they clearly believe that we are capable.
You have 1 minute left.
Of reasoning about these things, right? They clearly think we're capable of thinking our way out of these problems. And that's why they don't want us thinking. They want us in our feelings. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? So they unconsciously pay you a compliment, right? When they try to get you to turn off your problem solving mechanisms, your logic mechanisms. You see what I'm saying? They want you to turn that stuff off and just be in your feelings, right? And our job, and not as conservatives, even though that's what we are, our job as human beings and as citizens is to get out of our feelings and make sure we're thinking. I just heard it made on the top, and
thank you for using Securus. Goodbye.
All right, everybody. We're gonna give Dexter a chance to give us a call back, and then we're going to close out the show with our final segment. Stay tuned when you're listening to the Hidden Path podcast live stream with Dexter Taylor, aka Carbon Mike. If you're enjoying the show, again, please give us a like and please share. If you're listening to us on YouTube, I would appreciate a subscribe. We're trying to grow this channel. We're trying to grow this podcast. We're trying to get this podcast to the right eyeballs and ears. You know, there are some people out there who can influence legislation and can influence change. And Dexter is looking for both. And that's how we're going to get him home, is by influence. You know, Dexter is in prison right now because Democrats try to make a political example out of him. They tried to tie him to a negative connotation about firearms, which is ghost guns. They get a negative connotation because most people don't know the true nature of what a quote unquote ghost gun is. It's a self-manufactured firearm. If you build a car, is that considered terrorism? Is that considered dangerous if you build your own car? No, people marvel at that. You know, if you make a katana from steel, from a block of steel, do people think that is dangerous, or that you're going to go out there and kill someone, or you're going to traffic it? No.
So, this is a free call from.
No, what they actually understand is that that's a modern engineering. That's what it all is. And that's what Dexter was doing. But New York tried to make it into something so sinister when the man has never committed a crime in his life. He's never committed a violent crime in his life. But yeah, the state of New York saw different. He is considered a violent felon in the state of New York, which is ironic, right? Most people.
Securus, you may start the conversation now.
Welcome back, Dexter.
Yes, sir.
Again, everybody, you're listening to The Hidden Path with Carvin Mike. We're going to go ahead and close out the show tonight, but I do thank you guys for listening. So our final segment, we're still talking about Hakeem Jeffries. And Dexter has been, you know, giving us his commentary about the man, Dollar Store Obama. So for this episode, Dexter, you want to give us your final monologue about who you believe Hakeem Jeffrey is, especially when it comes to gun control and, you know, other things we talked about tonight.
Well, I mean, here's where I have to leave things a little bit up in the air because, given his background, again, you look at the man's background, right? Born in Brooklyn, raised in New York during the bad old days, right? Lifelong church man, right? Has someone who is in government who has actually had a real job. He actually was in the private sector for a while. The other thing is, has a brother who teaches Black history and civil rights. Has an uncle who was kind of what it probably would be fair to call a kind of a militant kind of firebrand. And that's, separate from whatever you think about Leonard Jeffries or what he said. That's a separate matter. I'm just saying that is, he supposedly in his background was kind of steeped in a certain kind of, in a certain kind of Black pride, which is not necessarily the bad kind of pride, right? I mean, there's, I don't want to get too deep into theology, but there's the pride that unites and the pride that divides, and the pride that divides is diabolic pride, and that's the pride that the scriptures, for my Christian listeners, that's the pride that the scriptures tell us to watch out for. It's very dangerous. possibly the most dangerous sin is diabolic pride. Symbolic pride, that's not a problem. St. Patrick's Day would be an example of symbolic pride, right? The pride that unites. Here we all are. Right. And I think it's well and good for Black Americans to be proud to be not just an American, but also part of that American tribe, the sub tribe within America, right? Being Black Americans, that's a good kind of pride. So you have a man who in his background seems to be steeped in these things, seems to be knowledgeable about these things. Seems to care about these things, and then you look at what he actually says and does as a political actor, as an office holder, and what he does not say, what he does not do, again, as a political actor, as an office holder. And we come to, my problem for this evening, which is you asked me, so, what's your sense of the man who is, I don't know who he is. I don't know who Hakeem Jeffries is. I mean, the bad news is he might not even know. Because the things he says and does, and the things he does not say and do not do, these things don't seem to fit a person who has that kind of. You would expect more from a person like that, is what I'm trying to say. So I don't know who Hakeem Jeffrey is. What I can tell you is why I do not trust him. And what I can tell you is why, irrespective of party and irrespective of skin color, ethnicity, and irrespective of all those things, what I can tell you is why I don't think anyone should trust him either. And that's it.
All right, everybody. I appreciate all of you stopping by and hanging out with us tonight, getting a conservative point of view about Hakeem Jeffries. Again, we do this every Monday night at 7 p.m. So if you enjoyed tonight, come back on Monday and hang out with us again while we continue giving you a path to victory.
Yes, sir.
My opinion of Hakeem Jeffries is this. I don't like the man. I think the man is very, very misguided on his views on both politics and just life in general. But we're going to continue discussing him. So if you enjoyed tonight's episode, come back for part 2. Well, we go into even more in depth about Hakeem Jeffries. You've been listening to. Go ahead, Dexter.
Sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say, as we're signing off, Mother's Day is this weekend. Happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there. God bless you.
Yeah. Happy Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day to all the moms who is celebrating. Happy Mother's Day to all the children out there of a great mom. I hope you are celebrating her and giving her the praise that she deserves. I lost my mom a couple of years ago, so I can't celebrate with her, but she's still in my heart. I still give her praise every day because
she deserves it.
Yeah. And shout out to my wife, who is a new mom. We're celebrating this Sunday, so I get to celebrate with her and create new traditions with her that I had with my mom.
That's right. Right. And yeah, and happy Mother's Day to my mom, who might be listening if the internet is up where she is right now. She's overseas at the moment. And happy Mother's Day to my ex-wife, who has really been a great mom to our kid. And I'll say this: I think he did right, Carl, by reminding people to give thanks and praise to their mothers. I would say this is a political show, right? And we're in a political atmosphere right now where some families, some families are not on speaking terms because of politics or for whatever reason. If you're not on speaking terms with your mother, for any reason, but especially because of politics, smoke a peace pipe with her. You know what I'm saying? Figure it out. You know what I'm saying? This goes for, if you're a liberal and your mom's a conservative, if you're conservative, your mom's a liberal, at the end of the day, it's not good for us to think about people solely as, solely in terms of this one aspect of them, their beliefs, their political beliefs, what have you, how they voted in an election. For God's sake, we like talking about politics and we think it matters, and it does matter. Politics is important. It is not infinitely important. Figure out how to get right with your family. And this being Mother's Day, if things haven't been right, well, it might be a good time to try again. So, yeah.
All right, everybody. We're signing off for the night. Again, I appreciate all 424 of you listening to us right now. Again, please share the stream out to the fat. We're signing off, but the show still can be listened to on both YouTube and Twitter. It's YouTube at The Hidden Path and on Twitter at The Hidden Path. So again, you guys have a good night and happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. Celebrate safely and stay armed.
Take care, y'all. God bless. Good night.